The monstrous monsters died one after another. The man alone calmly fought against an army of monsters. The enraged monsters attacked the man again and again. But the magician, surrounded by enemies, continued to fight. The man called upon the forces of nature for help. At that very moment, the battlefield was covered with sharp ice peaks. The human mage stood among the mountains of monster corpses. The remaining monsters looked at their slain brethren in horror. The angry demons asked the little man who he was. The man replied with a grin, "He is an apostle of justice, fighting against the evil that brings the world into chaos. He is Lucas Troman, humanity's strongest master." The monsters couldn't believe that some little human was going to confront them. Lucas smiled. "People like him definitely want to help the whole world. You can consider him a magical volunteer." The demons laughed. "A weakling human thinks he can defeat them." Troman raised his hand, and a magic sign appeared above him in gold. The young man chuckled and asked the monsters, "So what?" The mage calmly lowered his hand, directing destruction at his enemies. The battlefield turned into a raging sea of fire and stones. This time, all the remaining monsters were killed. After looking at the result, Lucas said that people are not weaklings. And then the magician heard an unfamiliar voice. He was saying that Lucas Troman was putting on airs. The young man felt an irresistible force pulling him towards itself. Lucas couldn't understand what it was, why he couldn't resist. The magician screamed in horror. The giant told Troman that they are the law of this world, and those who oppose disorder in it. Before Lucas was a demigod, the one whom people consider a god and praise. The young man objected. He hadn't actually praised anyone. The giant said that he could no longer watch the magician destroy order and laws. Lucas objected. How could a world with order be like this? The demigod said that although Lucas's abilities are highly developed, a person always remains just a person. The magician felt threatened. The next second, the giant grabbed Lucas with his huge hands and squeezed. The magician tried to break free, but felt that his mana was not concentrating. The giant said that the sin of opposing God is not permitted to man. This sin is a mortal sin. Now Lucas will befriend the darkness within the abyss. But he must not trust it, must not trust himself. The giant exclaimed. With endless suffering, the magician will regret his existence. This is the punishment for a man who dared to challenge God. Thousands of years have passed. The young man, having received the blow, flew back and hit the wall. The students asked the guy why he was carrying some kopecks with him. It looks like the Blake's third son's finances aren't doing so well. Unlike his successful brothers, the younger one is just an incompetent piece of trash. A classmate grabbed the young man by the hair. The younger Blake was not only a disgrace to the family, but also the object of hatred at the academy as the main mediocrity. A classmate told the young man with hatred that he was still not dead. Many in his place would have long since departed for the next world. Tears of pain and humiliation streamed from young Blake's eyes. A group of students constantly bullied a weak young man. The fat guy said Blake was asking for it. The second tormentor broke into a wicked smile. He hit his weak victim in the face with all his might. He never got tired of beating up young Blake endlessly. The guy sat on his classmate's body and continued to beat him. Then he lifted the almost lifeless student by the hair. Unhappy Blake flew to his fat classmate. The fat man hit the young man with all his might. The academy students kicked the fallen student until they got tired. They looked at the cowering youth with interest. Blake was barely alive, the dirt on his face mixed with tears. Barely audibly, he begged his tormentors to stop. One of them put his foot on the young man's head. The student told Blake that there would be a magic class tomorrow afternoon. They say Blake will be paired with him. The guy chuckled and said that he wouldn't try too hard. He was kind after all. But he will make sure that Blake remembers this day for the rest of his life. Because from tomorrow, he will not be able to walk. The young man was horrified. As they left, the students shouted at Blake to go home quickly and get a good night's sleep. They had fun tomorrow. Blake heard his tormentors laugh and that they really enjoyed beating him. The young man squeezed his trembling hand. Blake cleared his throat, pulled himself together, and thought with despair that he really wanted to be strong. Captivated by the abyss, Lucas stirred. The magician thought he heard something. Someone's weak call. Troman looked around carefully. He thought he saw a man calling him, but there was an abyss around. Probably hallucinations. This is not surprising. The endless darkness has surrounded him for so long and holds him tightly. It's easy to go crazy here. How much time did Lucas spend among these corpses? Hundreds, no, rather thousands of years. Troman mentally turned to God. Could this really be fear? Lucas heard Blake's plea again, but thought it was his subconscious. Young Blake stuttered as he asked his father what he had said. The head of the family repeated that he had ordered his youngest son to disappear from his life. The father added that he could not allow Frey to continually undermine the honor and authority of their family. The young man listened silently to his powerful father. When the cruel words reached his consciousness, The boy lowered his head. Frey asked if it was such a serious sin to be weak. Having stood up, the father said that he had no right to answer this question. The Blake family does not tolerate those who cannot become strong. Turning to his youngest son, the father said that he was not going to acknowledge his existence. From now on, Frey is no longer anyone to him. The young man's eyes filled with tears. Now he has no family. Father walked away with a firm gait, and Frey didn't know what to do next. After parting with his father, the young man returned to his home. Now, in the whole vast world, he doesn't have a single kindred soul left. He looked around his room in confusion, and then his gaze stopped on the bottle of pills. Frey silently took the jar from the table. Maybe this was the way out. Commit suicide and end all suffering at once. The young man's hands began to shake. He was too young to die. At this age, death is truly frightening. Lucas watched the weak man's tossing and turning in amazement. He remembered the words of the demigod, doubt and doubt again. The giant's words echoed in Troman's mind. Eventually, you will doubt your own existence. The magician screamed at the top of his lungs to make the demigod shut up. Lucas asked what kind of god he was if he approved of such an absurd world. The magician understood why this world was so ugly, and saw the one who brought it to this state. And that's why Lucas must never give up. A crying Frey swallowed the pills but vomited them. And then Troman felt that something was happening to him. The magician saw a bright flash right in front of him. Young Blake was on his knees, and the words "die" were pounding in his head. The guy looked ahead and thought that it would be better if he died. Cursing, Lucas asked who he was and how he entered his consciousness. The magician heard Frey's thoughts. He didn't blame anyone for this situation. A bird without wings is doomed to die as nature intended. Shedding tears, the young man whispered that it was all his fault. It's his fault he wasn't born with wings. It's his fault that he could become stronger. Having opened the window, the young man rushed down. Frey saw mocking faces floating before his eyes, telling him that he was a dirty stain on the Blake family. Students pointed at him and said he was a disgrace to West Road Academy. His tormentor leaned over and asked why he was alive at all. Stretching out into an evil grin, the classmate repeated that in his place, he would have died long ago. Neighbors and passers-by surrounded the young man who had jumped out of the window. Surprised, Lucas saw Frey's lifeless body right in front of him. Suddenly, Troman felt himself getting lighter. The demigod seals began to release him. What was going on? The moment this child entered Lucas's consciousness, it felt like a warm sun was shining on him. Young Blake was covered in blood and tears. Lucas leaned over to the boy and asked who he was. The magician placed his strong hand on the head of the crying Frey. Troman realized that he could be reborn again. This unfortunate young man did not end up here by accident. If this is true, Lucas will fly to the highest point and look at the whole world with his own eyes. These are the largest and strongest wings. Young Blake's gaze stopped. The tears dried. The young man fell silent. Frey woke up. He was still in his room. The young man looked at his hands in surprise. The great mage was reborn in the body of Frey Blake. Instantly, the bruises and abrasions on the young man's face disappeared. The guy carefully rose from his knees. He stood up and looked around. Lucas Troman realized he had finally returned to the human world. Looking at the calendar, the magician gasped. 4,000 years had already passed. Frey Blake was the weakest man on Earth. And he, Lucas Troman, is now the most powerful magician in the world. Lucas removed the bandage and straightened his hair. From now on, Lucas is Frey, and Frey is Lucas. Young Blake gave Lucas freedom. In gratitude, Lucas will give young Frey wings. The revived magician walked to the window and opened it. Troman took a deep breath. Finally, he was free. The magician raised his head and looked carefully at the sky. He spoke loudly to the demigod who calls himself a god. The young man promised the demigod that he would eat him in one bite. Lucas's eyes sparkled, and he said that he would soon pay the demigod a visit. Finding himself in someone else's body, Troman began training. Frey lived on the outskirts, so the magician could practice in peace. Lucas didn't waste a single minute. But with Frey's current body, he couldn't fully control his mana. First of all, you need to replenish your energy, and you also need to lay the foundation for mana absorption. In order to fight the demigods, he must regain his former strength as quickly as possible. The magician remembered his meeting with the powerful giant. No, he must become even more powerful to win this time. Lucas seemed to sense his imprisonment again and intensified his training. He got this chance after waiting 4,000 years, which means he must not miss it. Closing his eyes, the magician told himself that he needed to cast aside his recklessness and tame his anger. Now he must do everything in his power. The world of people has changed in 4,000 years. He must get to know it. Lucas closed his eyes and immersed himself in his training. Little by little, the young man's body began to fill with strength. The magician opened his eyes. Now he felt much better. Magical energy flowed around him. In a short period of time, Troman recovered to 5 stars. Suddenly, Lucas felt a terrible wave of nausea. The magician bent over and vomited. Young Blake's body began to cleanse itself. Lucas realized that this was the release of toxins that had been accumulating in Frey's body and mind for years. Troman felt a new wave of nausea. The toxins continued to flow out of the student's young body. The magician thought that he had to cleanse himself completely, so that nothing remained. The academy students hurried to classes. Fat Jack asked David why he came so early. Red-haired David replied that he was looking forward to today's sparring matches. The friends laughed. They were sure that there was not a single living place on Frey after the beating they had given him yesterday. Jack said he saw Frey in the infirmary. He grabbed a can of sleeping pills and ran away. The students bet 10 meal stamps that Blake would commit suicide. Lucas was vomiting continuously, and the entire area around him was already covered in filth. The magician cursed how much he had already vomited. Looking around, Troman was amazed. There was a huge amount of all kinds of rubbish around. Could all this have come out of Frey's teenage body? Lucas felt sorry for the owner of this body. The young man seemed to have been through a lot, although not as much as Lucas. And then Troman felt that he was simply ravenously hungry. After getting ready, Lucas headed to the cafeteria at West Road Academy. The students looked at Frey Blake in surprise. The young man devoured a huge amount of food, as if he had not eaten for a week. There were already mountains of empty plates to the right and left of the young man, but he still couldn't get enough to eat. After 4,000 years, everything tasted amazingly good to Lucas. The students, looking at the young man, could not believe that it was really Frey Blake. Having had his fill, the magician decided to walk along the corridors of the academy. He was surrounded by nothing but teenagers. Lucas was puzzled. At his advanced age, he should be messing with them. This must be a joke. But there's nothing that can be done about it, because Frey isn't 4,000 years old. In addition, Lucas must figure out how this world works. Only after this will he be able to fight the hated demigod. Troman walked to the door of the classroom where Frey studied. He did not end up in this body by accident, which means he must go through this path. Lucas sighed and thought that he shouldn't rush. Opening the door, the young man entered the academy auditorium. Frey Blake's classmates stared at him in surprise. Today he didn't look scared and timid. Something had changed in him. David looked at his victim in confusion. There was not a single trace of yesterday's beating on Freya. David exclaimed, "Frey didn't do it. He won food stamps," Jack cursed. "That weakling can't even kill himself." The fat man was spewing curses. This Blake was infuriating him. Lucas walked calmly through the auditorium, watching the boys closely. Suddenly he saw that the red-haired guy had tripped him. It was the red-haired David who constantly beat Frey. He looked angrily at the young man and said that his friend had finally come. Lucas looked at David in surprise. This guy didn't look like a friend. Troman clearly felt that he was facing an enemy. And then Lucas heard someone casually call out to Frey. The fat man grabbed the young man by the head and demanded 10 food coupons. Jack stated that Frey was the reason he lost his coupons. Lucas was surprised. It seemed like the fat man was trying to hit him on the head. This is definitely not a friend. You can meet such freaks in any era. The magician stared at his large classmate Frey. Jack grabbed the boy by the cheek. Lucas felt Frey's body tremble. Truman was indignant inside. How could he tremble because of this idiot? And the fat man loudly demanded that Blake give him his food stamps. Jack swung, intending to hit the young man. But unexpectedly for everyone, Frey gave the fat man back. A stunned Jack flew to the side. David, his mouth open in surprise, watched this scene. His classmate's eyes widened for the first time. Blake fought back against bullies. The pretty red-haired girl looked at Frey with wide eyes. The fat man looked questioningly at the always meek Blake. Lucas realized that these were the very same freaks who tried to force Frey to give up life. Jack's face twisted with anger and he cursed. He walked up to Blake again and grabbed his head. Gritting his teeth, the fat man swung at the young man again. Without taking his hands out of his pockets, Lucas activated magical energy. Before he could even understand what was happening, Jack flew away from his victim. The guys jumped up from their seats. No one expected this. Jack, having collected chairs along the way, crashed into the wall with a bang. The fat man fell heavily to the floor and did not move. Streams of blood oozed from the wounds on Jack's face. Despite the surprised exclamations, Lucas was completely calm. The guys started making noise. No one could understand how Frey did it. Jack even lost consciousness. And then Lucas felt awkward. He had just hit a child. Turning to Frey, he asked him to think of this as a special favor from humanity's most powerful archmage. Troman sighed heavily. He didn't want to fight with the children. The magician slowly approached the fat man. David couldn't believe it was really Frey. There's no way a weakling like him could do that. Everyone watched Frey Blake with their mouths open. Suddenly, Lucas and the red-haired beauty's gazes met. The teacher's voice was heard from behind. He asked what the noise was. Professor Dio, a magic teacher, entered the classroom unnoticed. The boys stuttered as they said that Jack had suddenly fallen and was not moving. The professor looked at the student carefully. Dio realized that the fat man had been hit with magic. There were traces of mana use on his body. The professor was puzzled as to who could have done this. None of the professors have the opportunity to use such a skill. Who would have thought that a student could do such a thing? While Dio was bringing Jack back to his senses, Professor Kevin replaced him in the class. Kevin explained that there was no need to worry about Jack, he would wake up soon. The teacher glanced at the girls with a greasy look. The whole academy knew that Kevin had a soft spot for female students. The young beauties tried not to attract the attention of the old womanizer. The professor smiled. The air in the classroom was wonderful because there were a lot of girls here. The charming Isabella stands out in particular. Kevin glanced around the audience. It was time to begin the magic lesson. And then Kevin saw Frey. The young man was carefully reading a textbook. The girls whispered that they hated that depraved pig Professor Kevin. Lucas looked up from his textbook and looked questioningly at the teacher. He mockingly asked Frey what happened. He even came to class today. Kevin stared at the younger Blake. Truman couldn't understand what this old man wanted from him. The professor considered Frey a complete bookworm. Lucas smiled broadly and apologized to the professor, saying that he was very busy. The girls whispered, saying that Kevin was incredibly disgusting. The professor shook with anger, which meant Blake had more important things to do than Kevin's lesson. Lucas smiled, of course. He was at the peak of his youth. Muffled laughter could be heard from the audience. The teacher also chuckled. Of course, the young man really was at the peak of his youth. But the professor didn't consider his lesson to be at all unimportant. Frey's classmates sympathized with him, believing that he would get into trouble. Kevin decided to ask Black a few questions. If Frey can't answer any of them, he'll have to admit his defiant behavior. Bending over the young man, the professor asked the first question. Frey must list the 3 main weapons of the evil warrior King Kassajan. The name stirred up old memories in Lucas. The young man asked Kevin what he had just said. Did he really name Kassajan? In his mind, Truman went back 4,000 years. Among the high mountains and green forests lived a great warrior. Kassajan stood on a high cliff. Thanks to continuous training, his body looked like solid muscle. Kassajan concentrated maximum energy in his hand. Suddenly, the warrior clenched his fist tightly. His whole body was on fire as Kassajan practiced his attack. Energy from his powerful fist rushed forward. The attack was so powerful that it destroyed everything in its path. Kassajan directed his attack towards the top of the nearest mountain. As soon as the attack hit its target, stones flew all over the area. The warrior was pleased. The blow destroyed half the mountain. Kassajan sighed with relief. Everything worked out. And then he heard a familiar voice behind him, asking the warrior to calm down. Otherwise, nothing would remain of the mountains. Lucas asked if Kassajan really wanted to let the animals starve by destroying their homes. The warrior greeted his old friend with a smile. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. Kassajan lived in a house in the middle of dense forests. Despite the guest's arrival, Kassajan continued to train. Lucas was outraged why he continued training when he met his friend after so many years. Kassajan suggested that the young man not be shy and drink some tea. The magician sighed. The warrior knows nothing but training, so he never marries. Kassajan sighed. A woman's heart was impossible to understand, just like Lucas's. Truman asked in confusion what was wrong with him. He didn't seem to have any problems. The warrior said that love for women has a sinister purpose to destroy one's self-control. Desire for an indomitable person makes him incapable of standing on his own feet. Kassajan added that warriors must be as still as a rock in front of women. The warrior asked Lucas if this wasn't the case with magicians. Kassajan looked at his friend thoughtfully. He had no luck with girls. Lucas was confused. He did not expect such philosophy from the warrior. Finally, Kassajan cheerfully told the magician to just drink his tea. Truman's eyes filled with tears. It seemed that Kassajan had succeeded in life. An idiot who knows nothing but training has become a celebrity thousands of years later. Kevin asked what happened to Frey. Couldn't he answer the question? The students were whispering among themselves. It seemed Blake had been caught. Isabella thought that pervert Kevin was just showing off his knowledge. The red-haired beauty apologized and turned to the professor. Isabella said that this question had nothing to do with the magic lesson. The boys were surprised why Isabel was behaving like this. Lucas was surprised that this pretty girl spoke in such a military tone. The professor could not take his eyes off the young beauty. Grimacing, he asked what the student was talking about. The girl replied Kassajan was a real warrior. He used mana only to help himself in training. Isabel asked if he could be considered a magician. Kevin confirmed that Isabel was right. Kassajan was not a mage. The professor slowly approached the student. He asked if Isabel really wanted to insult those who follow the path of the magical warrior. The girl replied that this was not the point of their conversation. Everyone watched Kevin and Isabel's squabble with surprise. Lucas was surprised. The teacher says it's an insult. It's just ridiculous. Kasajin would have killed Kevin if he had called him a magical warrior. The professor clearly did not expect such courage from Frey. The girl thought it would be quite a funny discussion. Taking Isabel by the shoulders, Kevin suggested that they continue discussing the matter in his office alone. Throwing the professor's hand off her shoulder, the girl asked why he was behaving like this. Kevin was surprised when he received a rebuff. He thought that Isabel was not like that at all, but she had no manners. Now the professor turned to the girl with a question. He asked to name the 3 chosen weapons of a magical warrior. Lucas replied, King Ho's gloves, Giant's belt, and storm necklace. Kevin turned to Blake, his mouth slightly open in surprise. Lucas said, smiling. Kasajin didn't use anything but these 3 items. Troman had advised his friend to be more fashionable on more than one occasion, but he didn't listen. The magician looked questioningly at the arrogant professor. He asked mockingly if he was mistaken. Kevin said, confused, that this was the correct answer. Lucas laughed. He couldn't answer it wrong. The guys were asking each other if Frey wasn't acting a little strange today, but the professor was not going to leave Isabella alone. He said that the girl doesn't know the rules of behavior in the classroom at all. Kevin grabbed the young beauty by the hand and pulled her towards him. He said that she should come to his office immediately. Isabella looked at the lustful professor with fear. Truman decided to come to the girl's rescue. Turning to Kevin, he said that Kasajin had a habit of saying certain things. The warrior said that love for women has a sinister design that destroys a person's self-control. This desire for an indomitable person makes him incapable of standing on his own feet. Lucas added that anyone who fails in these aspects is no better than an animal. The confused professor asked what the meaning of Frey's words was. The young man smiled. Perhaps Kasajin was wrong in these respects. After all, Kevin is still standing on his own 2 feet just fine. The teacher's face twisted with anger. He yelled at Blake, and the students watched in shock to see what would happen next. Gritting his teeth, the professor let go of Isabel's hand. The girl looked at Frey with wide eyes and did not recognize him. Kevin suggested seeing how far Frey's restless personality would take him. The professor reminded that the young man must answer the questions, otherwise he will be held accountable for his behavior. Lucas calmly asked what the next question was. Kevin was sweating profusely as he listened to the student. All of Frey Blake's classmates listened to him with their mouths open. David couldn't believe his ears. Something was definitely wrong with this guy today. Isabella was shocked that Frey knew so much, and Troman answered all the professor's questions without hesitation. Kevin was stunned the young man answered all the questions correctly. But this is impossible. Even the professors of the academy do not know the history of the Age of Light. Is this really the worst student of the academy, Frey Blake? Turning to the professor, the young man said that it was time for lunch. Are there any other questions? This is all fun, of course, but he is hungry. Kevin was shaking. How could the boy know the history of 4,000 years ago in detail? The young man looked at the professor imperturbably. The magic teacher was seething with impotent anger, but suddenly he realized that it might not be the boy Frey in front of him, and Kevin lowered his head in fear. He stuttered that that was enough, and Lucas rushed off to lunch. The magic professor, sweating profusely, replayed this strange lesson in his head. Isabel looked at the young man with eyes wide with surprise. The students headed to the cafeteria for lunch. Whistling a song, Lucas also went to get food. Suddenly he heard Isabel's voice behind him, asking if he was going to lunch. Truman looked at the young beauty in silence. A flash of sadness appeared in the magician's eyes. The girl looked questioningly at her strangely changed classmate. Lucas turned away silently and continued on his way to the cafeteria. Isabella wondered if he was ignoring her. She followed Troman stubbornly. The young man, with his hands in his trousers, walked leisurely to lunch, and Isabel also followed him slowly. The magician covered his face with his hand. This was the last thing he needed here. Turning around, he angrily asked why she was following him. Isabel timidly replied that she was going to lunch that way. Lucas didn't understand why she spoke in such a manner. Isabel was embarrassed. It was a family custom. Finally, they reached the student cafeteria. Truman filled the entire table with all kinds of dishes. Isabel was amazed that he could really handle everything alone. Wishing the girl a pleasant appetite, the magician remarked that if she fasted for 4,000 years, she would worship every meal. Isabel didn't understand what this strange young man was talking about. Embarrassed, the girl said that she could not find a more suitable place to sit. She asked the young man how he knew the history of the Age of Light, and he asked what it was about. It began 4,000 years ago, and it is called that because the greatest magicians in history lived then. Lucas listened attentively with his mouth full. The magician told himself that he just needed to take a breath. Isabel said that magical development had only deteriorated since then. Troman realized that this was most likely the work of demigods. The girl continued her story about people who became luminaries of magic. These were the great warrior Kasajin, the sage Shuhei Weissman. Among them was the black witch Iris Fizban. And finally, the strongest magician, Isabel's idol, Lucas Troman. The girl said with a sigh, he was truly a great man. If he were alive, Isabel would have asked him to marry her. Lucas laughed loudly, and the girl asked in surprise why he was laughing. The magician noted cheerfully that the milk had not yet dried on her lips, and she was already getting married. Laughing, Lucas thanked the girl and replied that he was not interested in children. Isabel was indignant, calling Frey rude. The students were confused as to when Isabel had been having lunch with Frey. One of the boys said he saw her following him. But this girl has always been very self-confident and the best. Even David was rejected by her on several occasions. At that moment, Frey Blake's constant tormentor entered the room. David was surprised to see Isabel and Frey sitting together. The interlocutors were arguing heatedly about something. David frowned. This boy was driving him crazy today. Isabel reminded the young man of the last question the professor had asked. Lucas looked at the girl questioningly with his mouth full. She clarified that the question was about the 3 areas of research of the sage Shuhei. The young man named assimilation, evolution, and conflictology. But until now, Isabel only knew about the first 2 directions. Troman couldn't understand what she wanted from him. The girl asked to tell her about the latest research. Lucas asked what her current level of development was. Isabel replied that she was a 3-star level. The magician noted that at her age, 3 stars was quite good. The beauty was surprised. Frey speaks like a man who has lived a long life. Lucas, grinning, confirmed, disgustingly long. Isabel's face lengthened, but weren't they the same age? The magician answered mysteriously, maybe yes, maybe no. The girl was surprised at what he was talking about meanwhile. The magician's plates were empty. Leaning back, Lucas exhaled. He was full. Having collected the plates, the magician told the girl that she was eating too slowly. Isabel persistently asked for an explanation of the essence of studying conflictology. Lucas advised me to read books. He is strong in practice, not theory, so he may be biased. Isabel became more and more surprised. Looking at Frey's back, she asked in confusion, not theory, but experience. No, this young man cannot be Frey Blake. Isabel quietly said after the magician that he had been replaced. In the next lesson, the students practiced magic through one-on-one combat. The teacher warned that only first-level magic was allowed. Finally, David waited for this lesson. The boy looked at Frey Blake with hatred. David didn't understand why Isabel was talking to that freak Frey. The professor warned that everything would be like in a real battle even if the student was wounded. The responsibility would be his own. Lucas watched the professor with interest. Isabel asked if he was Professor Jae-in. The magician whispered that Jae-in was beautiful. The girl jumped up. Frey is probably out of his mind. He is saying such obscene things about a teacher who is over 40 years old. Troman smiled and said that she was simply beautiful. He remarked that Isabel should learn from her. This is what is called perfect feminine beauty. The girl decided that Freya was attracted to older women. The first fight was announced Cadet David against Cadet Frey. Lucas looked calmly at the boy. He was no match for him. David was eager to get rid of the hated Blake. The opponents slowly moved towards each other. David asked with a grin how Frey was feeling. He thought he would die before this fight even happened. Yesterday, David was so eager that he couldn't even sleep. But Truman was least interested in the boy. The magician confidently approached Professor Jae-in. The whole group gasped in confusion at what this Blake was doing today. Hugging the professor, Lucas whispered that he had woken up from sleep to meet her. The magician smiled and told Jae-in that he was still very young at heart. Isabel didn't understand what her classmate was saying. Lucas whispered to himself if the professor would like to share a meal with him that night. Jae-in commandingly told the student to return to his seat. The magician offered that if he won the fight, Jae-in would treat him to dinner. The whole group laughed. Frey will win the fight. It's just hilarious. How weak Blake can win a 3-star David. Unexpectedly, Professor Jae-in agreed to the magician's condition. Lucas smiled. She promised. Ji-in's legs gave way. She didn't understand what was wrong with her. The warrior looked after the strange student with a sigh. Turning slightly, the magician quietly asked what she was doing, that she needed to come to her senses. It's not right for Jae-in's heart to flutter for such a young guy. David asked Frey with a grin if he was crazy. The classmate laughed. He didn't know that Blake liked that kind of thing. David asked if the guy asked Jae-in to cancel this fight. Lucas asked in surprise why the fight was canceled. The guy frowned. Frey's confidence infuriated him. David asked. It seemed Blake didn't understand the situation he was in. The guy hissed. First he would rip out Frey's vocal cords. Then David promised to crush all the limbs. It would be fun. The tormentor promised Blake that this would be the last day he would walk on his own 2 feet. The magician looked calmly at the arrogant boy. He replied that with the magic of the 1st star, he would not be able to cause such damage. David laughed. Frey will see everything. Jae-in announced the start of the fight. The opponents stood opposite each other. David used the Stone Rage skill with a smile. At that very moment, stones began to rise from the surface of the battlefield. The rocks formed into huge, sharp, deadly peaks. The guys were shocked. David uses Stone Fury in battle. But for the guys' friends, this didn't seem to come as a surprise. A frightened Isabel rushed towards the professor. The girl asked if Jae-in hadn't said that only first-level magic could be used, but the teacher replied that David was not breaking the rules. Isabel was shocked. Isn't this a violation? David told the enemy that this technique is passed down only within their family. Although it is powerful, even a first-level mage can use it if the conditions are met. Lucas was surprised that David was using the symbol of family to mock a person. The pleased boy asked Frey if he was scared. Troman smiled and replied, "Not really." A magic rocket lit up in the young man's hand. The students watched the fight with their mouths open. Isabel couldn't believe Blake was acting so confident. Looking at the ball, Lucas chuckled. "Good. The color is quite bright." David burst out laughing when he saw the magic rocket. Does weakling Frey really want to stop the Stone Rage with this simple technique? Troman took aim, preparing to strike. Lucas snapped his fingers at the magic missile. To the surprise of those present, the rocket destroyed the stone weapon. In addition, Frey's missile hit David hard. The smug guy suddenly got hit in the neck. Lucas's blow sent the boy flying and deactivated the Stone Rage. David was hit where he planned to hit Frey. The boy tumbled helplessly across the battlefield. The peaks turned back into stones and fell to the ground. David lay shaking among the stones and could not utter a word. The whole class gasped in surprise. No one expected this. David's friend, gritting his teeth, watched the unexpected outcome of the battle. Isabel, her mouth open, looked from one participant in the fight to the other. Professor Zayn watched the duel with surprise. Lucas walked up to David and looked at him carefully. The guy only wheezed and couldn't utter a word. Tears streamed from his eyes and he showed that he had lost his voice. Frey and David's classmates weren't the only ones watching the fight. The two seniors looked at the younger Blake with interest. One of them said that this was a practice of combat using C-class magic. The slender guy silently clutched a stone in his hand. Lucas said David should be ashamed of using secret techniques for such a thing. It would tarnish his family's reputation. The frightened boy opened his mouth helplessly. The magician asked with a smile what David said after the vocal cords. The ball of the magic missile began to spin in Lucas's hand again. He remembered that David had promised to crush his limbs one by one. Tears gushed from the frightened boy's eyes. He whispered that he was wrong and begged for mercy. David cursed silently and lost his voice completely. Meanwhile, Troman sent out another magic missile. David experienced hellish pain. The rocket broke his right leg. But Frey's tormentor could not scream. He only wheezed in pain. The boy crawls away from Blake in horror, gesturing for mercy. The magician asked with a grin what was wrong with David, since he himself had chosen this scenario. Isabel was horrified. She did not expect such cruelty from Frey. The girl thought that this was too much. She asked the professor to stop the fight, since the winner had already been determined. But Jian objected. David had not yet announced that he was giving up. Isabella tried to object, but the professor stopped her. She did warn them that the opponents should fight as if it were a real battle. Truman stood over the tormentor of the unfortunate Frey. Ji-in noted that the path of a magic master cannot be walked by relying on hesitation in a dangerous situation. The professor advised the girl to remember this. Isabel looked down. Now she felt sorry for David. Lucas looked at the arrogant teenager with shining eyes. He said David was so pleased when he was bullying him. But he didn't seem to like being the victim. The world is getting worse because people like David call themselves magicians. Truman advised the boy to never practice magic again. The magician quietly approached the shaking teenager. Leaning over, Lucas said he was joking. Did he really think he would crush all his limbs? The magician said that he was kind, so just legs would be enough. David, exhausted by pain, looked at the strange opponent. The guy sighed with relief, deciding that the fight was over. But for some reason Lucas stopped. And then the guy heard Frey's mocking voice with horror. He noticed that there were two legs. The magic rocket began to spin in the young man's hand again. Tears of horror filled David's eyes. Troman easily sent the magic ball into the teenager's second leg. David stared at the approaching blow. A bright rocket hovered above the student magicians. Lucas waved his hand and the ball flew towards David, who was speechless with fear. The boy wheezed in pain and humiliation. Frey Blake was avenged. The senior student noticed that this freshman was quite good. The slender guy looked at Lucas without looking away. Then he turned silently and walked away. The big guy joined his silent classmate. The students were discussing heatedly that this runt Frey had defeated David. David had a broken leg, so he was sent home. Many people knew that this David was disgusting. But without him, the atmosphere at the academy became more pleasant. No one understood how the younger Blake could win the fight. Someone suggested that the young man made a deal with the devil. A large senior stopped Lucas and asked if he was Frey Blake. The magician asked the guy who he was. He introduced himself. His name is Duman Milost. He is a fourth-year student. The young man smiled, because in front of him was the elder, the Sunbai. Lucas tried to figure out what this big guy wanted from him. Duman, closing his eyes, tried to influence the young man. Finally, he invited Frey to join the Truman Brotherhood. Lucas was stunned. The Brotherhood was named after him. This is a group of strong students representing West Road Academy. Duman smiled. Only a select few can join the Brotherhood. The boy showed a runic ring confirming his membership in the Brotherhood. These rings were made by Master Proteus from real gold. Duman said that with this ring the young man would not have to worry about food. Milost said that this is not all. The main thing is who leads the Brotherhood. Lucas said he refused and walked away. The thug couldn't believe his ears. This young man was out of his mind. A calm, commanding voice stopped Duman. Milost obediently fell silent, and Lucas glanced sideways at the speaker with interest. Next to Duman stood a certain Pierre June. The brute bowed obsequiously to the slender youth. Truman looked at June with interest. There was a sense of power in this young magician. Pierre said that he was the head of the Truman Brotherhood, and asked if this was the first time they had seen Frey. June apologized for Truman, and also invited the young man into the fraternity. Pierre looked at the first-year student very attentively and calmly. Lucas was very interested in this young magician. Truman sensed the young man's serious potential. Although he is young, he already has a good level. But Lucas waved his hand and casually replied that he did not want to join any fraternity. Duman clenched his fists and growled that this boy was insolent. How dare he refuse, but Jun stopped him with a gesture. Pierre looked calmly at his hot-tempered comrade. Milost stuttered and apologized. Jun watched the unusual academy student with interest. In the evening, Lucas went to a restaurant for the dinner he had won. The table was laden with all sorts of delicacies. Since Ji-in had promised, she treated the student to dinner. But the professor didn't understand what Isabel was doing there. Lucas tried to kick her out, but the girl didn't leave. She whispered that they should ignore her. That was not why she had come here. The magician was furious, insisting that the girl leave. Isabel said she couldn't find any information related to that battle anywhere, and she will follow Frey until he tells her everything. Ji-in asked if Isabel was talking about Kasajin's training method. The girl was surprised that the professor knew about him too. Ji heard a little about this at a scientific conference of magicians. But no matter how much she searched for this information among the manuscripts, she still didn't find out anything. Did Frey really know this method? If this isn't bragging, she'd like to listen too. Lucas drank tea silently. Having put down the cup, the magician left the table. Ji-in looked with wide eyes at the incredibly brave student. He put his arm around the professor and said he could tell her something better, but he is ready to do it after dinner in Ji-in's bedroom. The professor didn't understand what was wrong with her, because this was a student who was half her age. She felt like her head and heart were working separately. And then Isabel slammed her fist on the table. The girl screamed at how Frey could do such obscene things to the teacher. An enraged Lucas asked the girl if she wasn't leaving. Truman stood on the embankment and looked thoughtfully at the river. Much seemed strange to him in this world. If a demigod rules now, and they were a thorn in his side, then why hasn't information about them disappeared? After so many years, the memory of him, Kasajin, Shuhei, and Iris remains unchanged. Maybe even now there are people who fight in their name. Isabel quietly approached her thoughtful classmate. Today she never ceased to be amazed by him all day. The girl looked at Frey with wide eyes, as if she was seeing him for the first time. Lucas turned to the beauty and looked at her silently. He wanted to ask Isabel something. Truman was interested in who was the strongest in this academy. The magician asked who was the strongest among all, counting the students and teachers. The girl stubbornly shook her head, reminding him that Frey had not answered her question. Lucas smiled. If she told everything, then he would answer too. Isabel clenched her fists. She was incredibly happy. Among the students, the strongest is Pierre June, and among the teachers, Professors Dio Polsman and Adelia. But still, the strongest of all is Isabella's aunt. It turned out that the girl's aunt was the director of West Road Academy, Cerise Trisnain. Ji-in quietly approached the interlocutors. She added that their director is a 6-star mage, whom everyone in the kingdom calls Eternal Ice. Truman was surprised. Aunt Isabella had 6 stars. Ji said that theoretically, mages could reach 9 stars, but the last mage of that level lived about 3,000 years ago. There are currently less than 10 8-star mages in the world, so 9 stars can be considered a legend. Lucas looked at the West Road Academy complex. He asked if the magic that protects the academy was created by the director. Jae-in wasn't sure about it, but most likely yes. But Truman knew it didn't look like 6 stars. Lucas recalled his meeting with Pierre June and the offer to join the Brotherhood. The magician felt that something was fishy here. Perhaps Cerise Trisnain knew something. Truman decided he needed to meet her. Turning to Isabel, he wanted to tell the girl something, but changed his mind. Until he knew how things were with the demigod, he couldn't drag her into this. He might have to fight her aunt. Looking at the river, Lucas said that it seems like we need to level up to 7 stars. G chuckled. This would take at least 10 years, maybe even 20. Troman countered that if you try hard enough, you can finish it during the holidays. The professor laughed, saying that there was no harm in dreaming. Lucas looked at Jayan passionately. The professor opened her mouth in surprise. This boy embarrassed her. Hugging the woman, the magician said that he not only had big dreams, but also great love. Isabel coughed loudly and said that they had better be careful. She can tell her aunt what the student is doing here with the teacher. Lucas's face fell and he turned away in displeasure. Sighing, the magician said that this is why he doesn't like the little ones. Ji-in said that she had the same thing. Isabel was furious. She asked the professor what she meant. Ji answered evasively, nothing. Troman returned to contemplating the water. He shouldn't rush. He should do what he can do right now. The magician was deep in thought, looking at the starry sky. Yes, this is perhaps the most correct path. 2 weeks later, David returned to the academy on crutches. He screamed, how dare this bastard Frey run into him. The guy screamed that he would kill Blake because he couldn't lose to such an idiot. David burst into his classroom with angry cries. Seeing Frey, the guy asked him if he really thought he could get away with it. David growled. He would make Frey regret being born. The guy threatened to call all the guys, and today would be the end of Blake. Lucas, without looking up from his book, sent a magic missile at the screamer. Having lost his crutches, David fell to the floor. Classmates looked at the fallen guy with fear. David looked around in confusion, not daring to get up. To raise his sunken nose, David returned home again. Professor Kevin, upon hearing this, could not believe what had happened. Troman grumbled irritably at this trifle. These kids must have at least some level. This is the elite West Road Academy. To get used to using mana in Frey's body, Lucas needs to fight more. And then the magician heard someone call out to him rather rudely. A senior student invited Frey Blake to come outside and talk. The big guy asked the young man if he was good at magic. Lucas's companion led him to a barn full of students. The senior student didn't understand. Didn't Frey know him? He was Alex Dreamid. He is Blake's highly respected senior. Alex said that people like Frey drive him crazy. And what did he do to his brother David, whom he, Alex, cares about very much? Spewing curses, Alex asked how Frey was going to answer for this. Lucas chuckled and asked his brother David if he was scaring him now. Alex roared. How dare Frey speak to his sunbae informally? Troman shuddered. Oh, these little ones. The elder asked if the boy really thought he was all-powerful after defeating David. Listening to Alex's boasting, the Archmage yawned demonstratively. David's brother said that Frey's funeral would be today. Lucas asked Alex if he brought a freshman into this crowd and was now bragging to him. The senior student replied sheepishly that the others were just watching. Alex said he didn't need a crowd to deal with such an idiot. But Lucas didn't let the guy finish, sending him a magic missile. The seniors tried to protect Alex. Several of Drimid's friends, like himself, received magical blows. The seniors clenched their teeth in anger at how this boy dared to attack them. They looked at the unconscious Alex in confusion. How dare Frey hit him? You can't attack when someone is talking or transforming. Troman replied that he found it funny what he was doing here with little kids like them. Hearing that they were brats, the boys called Frey a bastard and advised him not to talk nonsense. One of the boys said he was the eldest son of the Gillid family, Golcarex. The other student turned out to be the second son of the Pinalac family, Frix. Lucas replied that he was a magic missile. With these words, the magician sent attacking balls in different directions. The enraged senior students tried to catch the young man, but he regularly attacked the guys approaching him. Lucas repeated over and over again that he was a magic missile. Soon, all the attackers were unconscious. The magician sat down and looked around at the beaten little ones. Truman sighed. They were weaklings. At this rate, he would sink to their level too. The next day, Lucas came to class as always. Dozing on his desk, he whispered in his sleep that he was surrounded by weaklings and brats. Isabel loudly asked the young man what he had been doing all this time. Raising his head, the magician sighed with relief, recognizing the girl. Isabel explained that because of his frequent use of the magic missile, the students nicknamed Frey the Death Missile. The magician blushed. The girl embarrassed him. Well, what can you do? He has no chance of using anything more powerful. Isabel looked with wide eyes at this amazing man. He is so young, but so strong, and knows so much. The girl suddenly thought how cute Frey Blake was. Suddenly, Lucas asked Isabel why she came. The student replied that she did everything as he told her. By mixing troll blood with magical water, she got a simply incredible result. The sleepy mage said that half troll blood would be even better. Their energies were mixed in a special way. Isabel reiterated that the result was simply incredible. The girl did not leave, looking expectantly at Frey. Finally, she asked what the young man would teach her this time. Lucas raised his head and looked questioningly at Isabel. The red-haired beauty looked trustingly at her classmate. The magician was surprised since when he started teaching her. Although she is quite capable, if she is trained well, she can even reach 8 stars. After some thought, Troman told Isabel that this time he would tell her something interesting. The girl waited with bated breath. Lucas said that this time he would tell her about the battle. The magician added that he would go to train during the holidays. If she followed him, she would be able to see for herself the battle she so longed to know about. But this is a dangerous journey that could cost the girl her life. Isabel quickly replied that she would go with Frey. There was so much fire in her eyes that Lucas felt embarrassed. The girl persistently asked Blake to take her with him to his training. On the appointed day, Isabella was ready to go with Frey. Surprised, Lucas asked the girl what kind of backpack she had. Was she going on a hike or something? The student replied that girls need a lot of things. Isabella asked Frey where they were going to go. Troman scratched his hair thoughtfully. He said that they were going to go to the mountains of testing. Isabel was confused. This place was so dangerous that it was called a paradise for monsters. The magician asked the girl if she knew how to get there, and she replied that Frey was constantly trying to catch her off guard. Isabel took a map of the kingdom out of her backpack. Even if they teleported from Espaliola, it would take about a quarter of a day, and they would encounter terrible monsters along the way. Lucas asked if she was scared, but the girl advised him not to underestimate her. She had no hope that the journey with Frey would be calm and safe. The magician asked what teleportation was. Isabel was surprised that Blake didn't know. This is what you can use to travel long distances, Lucas said thoughtfully. The world has become a better place after all. This was not the case 4,000 years ago. The magic is the same, but the industry has developed greatly. Perhaps there is a reason why the students are so weak, but teleportation is a really good idea. Isabel said that the downside of teleportation is the high cost. The magician was surprised that it was a paid service and asked how much it cost. The girl guessed that they would need about 10 gold coins. Lucas stopped and began rummaging through his backpack. Frey, although an aristocrat, had only 1 gold coin in reserve. But Isabel is also an aristocrat. She must have a lot of money. The girl asked Blake what was wrong with him. He wasn't feeling well. Approaching his classmate, the magician asked Isabel with a smile how much money she had with her. She calmly replied that she didn't take the money. A rich life makes people lazy, and is it necessary to take money to accompany Frey? To the magician's indignation, the girl replied that a journey begins with earning money for travel. Lucas was shocked. She brought a bunch of stuff and was talking this nonsense. Isabel repeated, "This is different. Girls need a lot." The magician grumbled that when they get to the capital, they will come up with something. He asked Isabel if she had ever worked, and it turned out she never had. Soon, Truman and his companion arrived at the seaport. Having looked around, the girl headed towards the pier. Right in front of the students stood a huge, beautiful ship. Isabel said they needed to get on board. Lucas asked if it was free. The girl confirmed. It was free for the academy students. The magician immediately understood why there were so many students here. Troman was delighted. The food here must be very tasty. As soon as he says the word meat, his mouth fills with saliva. How he adores their academy. But when it was Lucas and his companion's turn, the steward announced that there were no more seats. The next ship will arrive at the port only in 4 days. Lucas was in a trance. How could this be? The steward said that if the boys were satisfied, they could go to Cortesio. The students looked at the small sailboat with disappointment. The ship is, of course, normal, but it doesn't compare to what's nearby. The steward reassured them that they would be there in 5 days, and of course, it would all be free. The magician thanked him for his help, confused. In a seaside tavern, pirates were preparing for an attack. One of the robbers told the captain that they were ready. The captain nodded approvingly. They would go on the job tonight. The one-eyed pirate laughed. The captain asked why the bandit had gouged out his eye. He replied that being one-eyed was a symbol of piracy. And do they have any normal people left in the bloody robbers? The captain said their target was a ship sailing to Jotunbul. They will attack when the sailboat sails past the Oskal Islands. One-eyed laughed again. Today they would really profit. The pirate captain said that the ship was filled with children from rich families. The bandit reminded that the ship was called Cortesco. The captain introduced himself. His name was Mac Martins, and welcomed the passengers aboard the ship. Isabel asked the captain to take care of them. The girl asked why there were so few passengers on such a beautiful ship. The captain explained that they were sailing near the Oskal Islands, and there was a risk of encountering pirates. Isabel was scared. There were pirates there, but Martins calmed her down. They are guarded by 2 warships, each of which carries a 4-star mage. They all trained in the magic tower of battle mastery. Mac was sure that no matter what the pirates did, it would not affect them in any way. The captain had implicit faith in the skill of military masters. Moreover, they had already encountered pirates several times. Lucas yawned. Since they were masters, It really was reliable. The captain smiled. If the pirates had any sense, they wouldn't mess with the Empire's warships. And then Martins opened his mouth in surprise. Isabel looked at the sea with fear. The sailors stuttered and shouted that they were being attacked by pirates. Indeed, a pirate ship appeared ahead of us. The girl whispered that they were in big trouble. But where are the warships that guarded them? Truman watched the proceedings with impassiveness. Isabel was horrified. The warships were sunk. The captain couldn't believe his eyes. 2 warships sank instantly. Pirates couldn't have done that. The satisfied pirate stood next to the cannon and watched the victims. Suddenly, the bandit laughed loudly. He had succeeded. A few minutes ago, a sailor reported to the captain that Cortesco was already here. But they are accompanied by 2 warships, which are too much for the pirates to handle. The captain asked everyone to calm down. Their guest would take care of the military. The bandit introduced a special guest whom he had invited with difficulty. The mage's terrifying death aura terrified everyone. Before them is Lich Duller, who will help the pirates take their share. The one-eyed pirate opened his gap-toothed mouth in surprise. The bandit was so scared that he staggered on the deck. The captain shamed him, saying that he was behaving like a child. The pirate had heard of the Lich, but he looked terrible, like he was in a nightmare. The captain threatened the one-eyed man that if he didn't shut up, he would tear out his other eye. The frightened bandit said that the captain had opened a new page in the history of pirates. Meanwhile, Duller began to act. The eye sockets of his skull lit up as he cast a spell. Lich Duller called upon the ice spear technique to help him. Huge ice floes were supposed to fall on the ships. The war mages saw ice spears flying towards them. The captain of the warship cursed and asked what it was. The warship's master put up a defense. The second master also tried to protect the ship, but in vain. Ice spears flew inexorably towards the ships. One of the ship's defenders concentrated maximum force to repel the attack, but the ice spears still pierced the master's magical dome. The ice floes were already circling around the sorceress, but she continued to hold up the dome. The master saw with horror that the spear was flying straight at her. The next second, both warships were blown to pieces. The pirate captain laughed and shouted to the boys that it was time to go earn some money. With shouts and jeers, the bandits rushed into the attack. The bandit admired the work of Master Duller, and he instantly destroyed the warships. Lich replied that this was strange. The pirate broke out in a sweat. His assistant was terribly scary. Duller said there were 3 of them. He accurately summoned 3 ice spears, but for some reason the third ship remained unharmed. The pirate bowed and reminded the master that he had warned him not to touch this ship. The pirates intended to use these people as hostages. Hiccuping, the bandit apologized again to his terrible ally. This little skull is so disgusting. Leech said he wanted to block the ship, but the blow was weak and could not sink the vessel. The worried pirate asked what the master meant. Duller replied, "There is something on this ship." Captain Mac tried to calm the students rushing about on the deck. A mysterious man in a hood sat apart from everyone else. The man sighed heavily. Lucas looked around carefully. Isabel said in a trembling voice, "The warships were destroyed." Truman turned to his frightened companion. He advised her to calm down. They were just pirates. But the magician was most worried about something completely different. There were definitely 3 ice spears there, but whatever was supposed to fall on them disappeared along the way. The girl asked Frey if he had done it, and the magician answered negatively. Lucas remembered the recent feeling. He felt the wave of mana, but he couldn't stop it. He was no different from Frey. It seems the mage is still haunted by the memories of being trapped in the abyss for thousands of years. Lucas felt fear creeping up on him and his hands began to shake. He ordered himself to calm down. This enemy was similar, but he was not a demigod. Clenching his hand into a fist, the mage realized that this was undead mana. Isabel asked in confusion, if it wasn't Frey, then who stopped the spear? Lucas's gaze fell on the mysterious stranger. Approaching him, the magician said that they should get acquainted, since it was he who protected the ship. At this moment, the pirates went to board. The students panicked when they heard the impact with the side of the ship. Pirate boarding hooks were stuck into the sailboat's hull. Landing ladders were immediately erected between the ships. The pirates went on the offensive. The bandits mercilessly killed the sailors. Isabel whispered, "These are really pirates." The girl was scared. The pirate captain stepped onto the deck of the captured ship. Most of Cortesco's crew was killed. The one-eyed robber laughed. They had succeeded. There are about 40 people left alive. If everything works out, the pirates will be able to play and eat forever. The pirate captain broke into a satisfied smile. He asked the rich students how they were doing, and their friends, the treacherous robbers, came to visit them. Captain Mac Martins asked if the pirates knew what kind of ship it was. The pirate laughed. It was a treasure ship filled with the descendants of ancient houses. The bandits burst into laughter. One of the students exclaimed, "How dare these dirty pirates?" The captain looked closely at the daredevil. One of the academy's senior students stood in front of him. The guy clenched his fist and shouted, "These students will become excellent magicians in the future." So the pirates chose the wrong ship to hunt. Martins tried to stop his brave passenger, but the young man had already begun to cast a spell. At that moment, a blade flew towards the magician. Mac Martins felt steel whistle past him. The student flew back towards the wooden boxes, the dagger embedded in the boards a millimeter from his neck. The main pirate asked the boy, "It seems he hasn't fully grasped the situation. No one will give him time to get going." The student's courage evaporated and he began to shake with fear. The guy glanced sideways in horror at the knife stuck next to him. The frightened teenagers scattered in all directions, screaming. Lucas felt someone slightly deflect the trajectory of the knife flying towards his neck. It was the same guy who prevented the attack. Approaching the student, the mysterious magician said that this opponent was beyond his capabilities. He told the guy to sit still and keep his head down. The one-eyed man asked the captain if he couldn't hit the only target. The angry bandit said that this time he would show how it should be done. Seeing the frightened teenager, the pirate said, "This bespectacled guy will do just fine." The blades launched by the pirate captain pinned the young man to the side of the ship. The student wet his pants out of fear. The bandit laughed, and it seemed like the brat wet himself. The pirate ordered to wash this boy clean. At the captain's command, one of the thugs grabbed the boy. The mysterious hooded guy screamed no in desperation. But it was too late. The pirate threw the teenager overboard. The unfortunate young man begged to be saved. The current carried the student further and further out to sea. Soon the screams died down, and the academy students sank to the bottom. The boys were horrified. A boy from the 2nd grade had just been brutally murdered. The pirate captain looked at the youth with a bored expression. The young magicians decided to attack the pirate spawn again. The bandit blew on his finger and said that it was too noisy here. Academy students attacked sea pirates. Several bandits flinched and fell to the deck. But the pirate captain miraculously avoided the magical attack. A magical shield circled around the pirate leader. The guys were puzzled as to how this was possible, since he was an ordinary person. The sea robber smiled smugly. He was protected by the Lich. The aura of Lich Duller penetrated the captured ship. The undead magic instantly knocked the students of West Road Academy off their feet. Soon everyone on the ship saw a clot of terrible death magic. Among the lilac flashes, the skull's red eyes lit up and Master Duller himself appeared. The young magician stuttered and whispered that this could not be. On the deck stood the eerie figure of the Lich himself. This master was a celebrity in the world of magic. Almost everyone knew about him. Isabel asked in confusion if this was really the Lich. Lucas looked closely at the enemy who had appeared. Captain Martins asked the pirates if they had made a contract with the undead. Apparently the bandits have gone mad. The undead have no dealings with the living, but only use them. The pirate leader replied that they were only interested in money. Mac called the pirate a madman. Troman gently pushed Isabel away from him, saying that the hottie was too close. And then the magician saw that the girl was terribly frightened. She pressed herself against his hand and shook with fear. The girl whispered that these weren't just pirates in front of them. Weren't they all in a dangerous situation? Duller's minimum level was 5 stars, so 4-star battle mages couldn't stand against him. The Lich stepped forward and loudly said, "Come out." Everyone looked at the undead in confusion, not understanding what he was talking about. The magician said that the one who managed to stop his magic was here, and demanded that this person come out. Lich knew for sure that this man was here. The undead's eyes flashed. He wanted to see the enemy. Raising his hand, the dark mage prepared to attack. At the same moment, numerous ice spears appeared above the ship of envy. The Lich said that if the mage continues to hide, he will kill everyone right now. The students looked in horror, first at the peaks, then at the Lich. Mac Martin sighed in confusion. The old sea dog didn't know what to do. Dozens of ice peaks were approaching the small sailboat. The pirate captain turned timidly to Duller. Killing everyone was not part of his plans. The undead glared at the pirate, who immediately stopped short. Scratching his shaved head, the robber thought, "The Lich is really disgusting and scary." And then everyone heard someone walking towards Lich on the deck. It was that mysterious man in the hood. Duller asked the stranger if it was he who stopped his magic. The young man calmly replied that it was him. The undead demanded that the man state his name. The guy slowly removed the hood that hid him from his head. The academy students' mouths dropped open in surprise. Amazed, Isabel also looked at the daredevil with surprise. Lucas said quietly, "This is the same guy from the academy." The young man calmly said that his name was Pierre June. Isabella asked in surprise if it was Pierre June. Lucas asked if she knew him. He is known to everyone at the academy. He leads a prestigious club and is the scion of the very influential June family. Pierre has excellent grades, and he and Isabel are constantly competing for leadership. Lucas asked his companion if she was bragging or something. The girl said that she and Pierre had almost the same grades, but he was on a completely different level. The students began to make a joyful noise. Mr. June was here. Everyone was confident that they would now be saved. Isabel said Pierre possessed magic that was beyond her understanding. Troman said briefly, June can't handle Lich. Lucas saw that the brave young man was barely standing on his feet. The Archmage looked at Dullard, who towered over Pierre. The Lich's level was definitely higher than 5. June seemed to understand this, and toned down his arrogance. His strength would have been barely enough for the 5th, but no more. The fact that he managed to reflect magic of a higher level than him and not die is a true miracle. Isabel asked if Frey had a higher level of magic than the Lich. Lucas shook his head. He asked the girl to get away from him, otherwise it was hot. Pierre June sighed, wondering why the hell he had boarded this particular ship. He didn't want to be conspicuous, so he chose the one with fewer students, but who knew? After repelling the attack, Pierre's body seemed so fragile. Today was clearly not his day. Dullard looked closely at the young academy student. Pierre understood that he was not Lich's opponent, no matter how you look at it. Responding to Jun's thoughts, Lich said that today was his day. The undead hoped to find excellent material with Pierre's help. The young man understood what this monster was talking about, and he began to sweat in horror. The Lich's eyes sparkled. It was not for nothing that he agreed to help the bandits. Pierre June frowned. He needed to think of something urgently. June asked the captain what the purpose of all this was. The bandit broke into a satisfied smile and replied, Nothing special. The beautiful youth must pass this test, so let everyone sit quietly and calmly. In this case, the captain guarantees that he will deliver everyone to the Port of Cows as quickly as possible. The pirates laughed approvingly. The leader added that, of course, this would happen if the guys were paid well. Lucas sighed. In the end, it all comes down to money. Pierre, with his head down, listened to the pirate captain. Unexpectedly, June said that he had a proposal for the captain. He offered the pirates to take only him. With the money from the June family, the capital will be able to buy 2 such ships, but only if the rest are released. The bandit grinned. The immortal Dullard was on his side, which meant they could get money for everyone. Pierre smiled strangely. The pirate leader was, of course, right. June is no match for the Lich they hired and will most likely die. Magic lit up the young man's eyes. He said that he could drag the pirates to his grave with him. The captain of the sea robbers looked at the boy with apprehension. Lucas, he liked this guy more and more. Young people are so reckless after all. Troman said this country has a great future. In response to Pierre's words, Leech laughed loudly. With the boy's mana level, this is nothing more than bragging. June saw with horror that Dullard was attacking him. Streams of deadly mana surrounded the young man. The Lich, laughing, said that he would absorb the young man completely, and his empty body will turn into undead to store spare limbs. Having twisted Pierre's arms and legs, Lich said that the boy already belonged to him. The pirate leader laughed. The negotiations were over. He ordered to grab the students and drag them onto the pirate ship. The frightened teenagers scattered, begging for help. The robbers seized and tied up the academy students. Many people were eager to grab the pretty aristocratic girls. The one-eyed pirate was pleased, and the real fun began. He also really wanted to take the girl for himself. The one-eyed man's gaze settled on the bright, frightened Isabella. Approaching the girl, the one-eyed man called her to go play with dolls with the uncle. Turning to Lucas, the pirate advised the skinny guy to step aside. Troman turned his head from side to side. The magician couldn't understand who the one-eyed pirate was addressing. Finally, Lucas asked if it was the bandit who was talking to him. The one-eyed man laughed. Who else? This weakling only has a head sticking out. Shielding Isabel with his body, Lucas asked the pirate what that manner of speech was. The sea robber replied, Good boys, it's time to sleep. It's already late. Flexing his fists, the pirate promised to punish the boy for disobedience. Lucas chuckled, telling the impudent fellow to come closer. The students involved said Frey seemed to be crazy and was adding fuel to the fire. Fat Jack yelled at the crazy bastard Blake to control his arrogance. The one-eyed man grimaced. He'll have to teach the boy a lesson. The sea robber moved towards the red-haired beauty. The pirate drew his saber and asked Lucas if he seemed to be the one who wanted to get it the most out of everyone here. The bound passengers and sailors watched with their mouths open. Pierre June also looked at the brave young man in bewilderment. Troman calmly waited for the bandit to approach. He shouted, swinging his sword, that the blond man had forgotten his place. Now he would remind him. A frightened Isabel closed her eyes and screamed. No one had time to understand how the one-eyed pirate was hit. The bandit dropped his weapon and flew away from Isabel and Frey. The blow was so strong that the bandit flew without touching the deck. The one-eyed pirate kicked his legs helplessly and flew overboard. Lucas calmly told the enemy that he knew his place very well. There was a loud splash. The pirate fell into the water. The sea robbers looked at the young man with their mouths open. One of the students asked quietly, stuttering, What just happened? Could it really have been Frey? the Academy's biggest loser who did this? Pierre couldn't believe that this was reality. Using mana, Blake accelerated many times and struck the enemy. But his speed amazed Jun. Even he couldn't see the boy's movements. Pierre knew that Frey was hiding some kind of ability, but he couldn't even imagine using mana at this level. Isabel asked Blake in confusion if he had killed the pirate. Lucas stroked the girl's head, trying to calm her down. He told her not to worry about it, because the pirate was clearly stronger than her. The magician smiled. He simply got rid of the inequality. Isabella looked at her strange companion in surprise. Lucas stood in the middle of the deck and prepared for the pirate's attack. He understood that the bandits would certainly want revenge. The tall pirate sighed and asked what to do with this show-off now. Looks like the guy wanted to show off in front of the girl, and now he's going to die. But before the big guy could finish speaking, Lucas appeared in front of him. The pirate couldn't understand how the boy ended up there. The Lich watched the unusual young man with curiosity. Before anyone could react, the pirate's entrails flew into the air. The sea robber howled in mortal pain. Troman said that they would be better off accepting Pierre's proposal. After throwing away the bandit's body, Lucas added that he, unlike Pierre, was not as kind. The enraged pirates grabbed their weapons and uttered curses. The magician looked at them and said that pirates still didn't look much like people. Forgetting about the captives, the robbers rushed at the young man in a crowd. Lucas was completely calm. These opponents did not frighten him. Having grabbed the body of the dead boatswain, the magician threw it to the pirates. The attackers paused for a moment, throwing the corpse aside. Lucas directed a powerful stream of energy at the bandits. Several bandits died as a result of the attack. At this time, several more pirates attacked the magician from behind. But as soon as they got closer, they were engulfed in icy flames. Troman, standing in a protective field, turned the pirates closest to him into a bloody mess. Soon, only the remains of the formidable bandits were circling in the air. The pirate captain couldn't believe his eyes. The surviving bandits tried to overcome the young man, but none of the attackers could survive the fight with the magician. The guys were stunned. Frey killed so many pirates at once. One of the robbers asked in confusion who this boy was, and then the pirate saw that the young man was heading towards him. Troman moved across the deck with astonishing speed. Everyone watched the unusual student, spellbound. Before the bandit could even blink, the magician appeared in front of him. Lucas's menacing eyes blazed with anger. The magician struck the pirate, throwing him away from the young student. The enraged pirates continued to press on the nimble young man. Stepping on the face of one of the enemies, the magician pushed off and soared into the air. Lucas did a somersault in the air as the pirates ran and stabbed each other. The bald pirate angrily shouted that he would kill the boy. And then the pirates saw that the young man was holding a large energy ball in his hands. Their anger instantly disappeared. They stuttered, asking what he was doing and asking him to stop. Lucas attacked his bloodthirsty opponents from above. The frightened pirates looked with horror at the approaching blow. The charge of energy sent by the magician grew larger and larger as it approached. A deafening explosion was heard on the deck of the ship. All that was left of the band of pirates were weapons and scraps of clothing. Troman landed softly on the deck of the sailboat. Having looked around, the magician was pleased with the result. Suddenly he heard Isabel's muffled voice. The pirate held a knife to the girl's throat and told Lucas not to move. Otherwise his girlfriend would be finished. The pirate screamed that if the guy even moved a finger, the girl's throat would turn purple with blood. Lucas thought for a moment. He pretended to be confused in order to distract the pirate. The bandit looked at the guy questioningly. Unexpectedly, Isabel cast a spell. Lightning bolts burst from the eyes of the Academy's top student. The pirate didn't immediately understand what was going on. He didn't expect the girl to attack him. Isabel loudly called for a lightning strike, and dozens of lightning bolts instantly struck the bandit's body. The powerful electric shock caused blood to gush from the bandit's eyes and nose, and foam to come out of his mouth. The large fellow fell with a crash onto the deck behind the girl. Mac Martins and the students gaped in surprise. Pierre, captivated by the Lich, looked at Isabel with all his eyes. The pirate captain, looking at the deck, cursed. Isabel looked up timidly at her companion. The girl approached Frey Blake cautiously. Smiling, she asked the young man how he liked her skills. Lucas winked at the beauty and said that the little one was still showing off. The leader of the bandits clapped his hands loudly. Isabel and Lucas turned around in surprise at the unexpected applause. The pirate captain said bravo to the young man. Apparently he was a guard pretending to be a student. Laughing, the bandit admitted that the boy surprised him. Troman listened to the pirate coldly and calmly. The red-haired captain smiled tensely. Realizing that this was no ordinary person, he offered the young man a deal. The pirate leader said that it would be difficult for the guy to cope with all his guys on his own. Lucas irritably urged the bandit to be shorter. The captain offered the guy half. The pirate is willing to take only half of those on the ship. The magician only remained sullenly silent in response. The students, tied up by the bandits, were shedding tears of fear. Some of the young men also sobbed, saying that they did not want to die. The pirate smiled. He was sure that this was a good offer, and the guy would become a hero, and the robbers would not be left without bread. The satisfied bandit leader added that everyone would benefit. Lucas replied that the pirate was rotten to the core. What was there to gain? The captain had already lost a lot of people. But the pirate shrugged. It was not a great loss. He suggested that the young man choose those he liked best. One of the students immediately turned to Blake. Having escaped from the pirate's hands, the girl begged Frey to take her. Running up to the young man, she clung to him, begging for salvation. The girl shouted that she would pay well, if only Frey would tell her how much. Blake can ask for anything, just let him take her. The other students also shouted for him to take them. They shouted in unison, offering different amounts for their salvation. The magician grimaced, asking what he should do. He asked Isabel what she would say. The young man smiled bitterly. One could consider the trip worth it. Lucas looked at the frightened rich students with a smirk. He jokingly asked who would give more than 200 gold pieces. Isabella was furious. What kind of auction was this? Each one tried furiously to prove that his life was more important than the others. A stunned Isabel listened to the boys with her mouth open. Suddenly, the magician said that they were disgusting to listen to. Pushing the girl away, he told her not to stand too close. It seems these kids were taught from a young age to waste their parents' money. What kind of future magicians can any of them be if each one is afraid for his own pathetic soul? A magician is, first and foremost, a hero who protects the weak. A true magician thinks first and foremost about saving others. Lucas chuckled and suggested that everyone think about the amount again. The pirate captain and the lich watched with curiosity. The bandit leader felt that something was wrong. The boy was dangerous. The pirate glanced sideways at his creepy ally and remained silent, as if he had kept his mouth shut. The robber was perplexed. There was someone capable of defeating this little skull on legs. The lich responded to the pirate's thoughts. He could be sure that such a person had not yet been born. The pirate clenched his teeth. He can also read minds. The leader of the bandits sighed. Now he would have to watch his thoughts. The lich looked at the boy carefully. He had never encountered such a level of mana before. The young man was literally glowing with it. Duller assumed that the guy was at most level 5. The undead was sure that the young man would not become a worthy opponent. The lich dropped his disguise, preparing to take Frey's body. Duller told Lucas that he couldn't pass up such a beautiful body. The lich ordered the young man to die, to renounce life and become his. As he warmed up, Troman noticed how tactless they all were. Seeing that the boy was not afraid, the undead prepared to attack. Duller used the living rocket technique. Isabel was terrified. This magic was deadly. Pointing the weapon at the young man, Lich ordered him to die. Lucas stood calmly on the deck and waited. To the surprise of those present, he was able to easily dodge the attack. The bandits and prisoners ran away in panic in all directions. The living rockets, having made a circle, began to turn around. Isabel warned Frey to be careful. This is homing magic. It will pursue the target until the very end. Having made another maneuver, the young man answered his companion that he knew about it. Pierre knew it was dangerous. Homing magic would rush after the target without external control. What other aces does this duller have up his sleeve? The lich used another technique. He summoned the cursed right hand. A magic circle began to spin near Lucas. Soon the lich's mana turned into a multitude of dead hands. Troman dodged the missiles again and noticed another attack. The technique of the cursed right hand was well known to him. Dead hands reached out to him, just like they had in the abyss. The pirate leader clenched his fists in joy. He got caught, the bastard. Isabel was so scared that she couldn't remember how Frey would cope with such magic. The dead hands of the damned right hand were pounding something on the deck. Everyone was sure that Frey was dead. To contain the spread of dark mana, Isabel put up a shield. Most of the students hid in the corners in fear. The red-haired beauty defended herself and saved others as best she could. The girl looked with eyes wide with horror at the place where the right hand had just been raging. The smoke began to clear and she called out loudly for Frey. No one answered, and there was a huge hole gaping in the side of the ship. The girl continued to call, begging Frey to answer her. Pierre June clenched his teeth and cursed. Lich's living missiles were still hovering in the air. The undead looked at them and was surprised, which meant the guy was alive. But to Duller's surprise, his weapon was flying straight at him. To protect himself, Lich put up a shield, which was hit by missiles. The dark mage couldn't understand why his skill worked so strangely. He chuckled. This was the first time something like this had happened to him. Pierre felt the Lich's bonds on his body disintegrate. Duller concentrated on destroying his own weapon. The Lich struck the living missiles, and they shattered into pieces. He didn't understand why they seemed to be here. They must be chasing that guy. And then everyone saw that the young man was standing behind Duller. Isabelle and Pierre couldn't believe that Frey was still alive. The girl asked the young man if he was okay. The stunned Lich turned around. This can't be. The boy dodged attacks from 4 sides, and in an instant found himself behind him. Lucas quipped that the Lich had a cute back of his head because you couldn't see his ugly face. Duller couldn't believe that the boy was capable of doing at least 5 calculations at once. Even the Lich is not capable of this. Such skill cannot be available to humans. What kind of unusual young man is this? Isabelle carefully asked Frey if he was okay. Lucas turned his head slightly and looked at the girl. She looked with wide eyes at the changed Blake. For a second she thought she saw the legendary Lucas Troman. Isabelle didn't know what to think. Behind Frey's fragile figure, the renowned archmage was clearly visible. The girl looked questioningly at her classmate, and did not understand whether it was Frey in front of her. Pierre looked up and saw that Lich was preparing a new attack. The undead created a huge number of ice spears. The other students also saw the approaching threat. Duller had a bad feeling and decided to destroy the entire ship. It's a pity, of course, that he missed Pierre, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Looking down, Lich was surprised once again. The undead saw that a huge barrier had appeared above the ship. Lucas put up a defense to save the ship from destruction. Troman held a giant shield in one hand. The Lich whispered that this couldn't be. This boy reflected everything. Jun couldn't believe it. He almost lost consciousness just because of one peek. Isabelle mentally asked Frey who he really was. An angry Duller shouted at the pathetic little man to try and stop it. Pierre saw that this spear was simply enormous in size. Troman realized it was time for him to deal with the Lich. Pushing off from the deck, the magician soared into the air. Lucas took advantage of the hole in the undead's mana created by the spear. The magician jumped and split the giant ice floe into pieces. Duller was stunned to see that his spear had split, and soon the young man himself appeared before the surprised Lich. Pierre, June, and Isabelle held the barrier created by Lucas above the ship. Thanks to the protection, all the fragments of the ice spears fell into the water. The Lich laughed. Some youth who barely reached the 5th level could not be a worthy opponent for him. Lucas asked Duller. He already knew the way. The undead was surprised that the youth really wanted him to show the way above the 5th level. Truman advised Lich to pull himself together. He hadn't used anything stronger than magic missiles in a long time. But now the undead had pleased him. Duller was choking with indignation. Who the hell is this kid? Lucas smiled. Now he is a loser of the Frey Blake Academy. But his real name is Lucas Troman, and he's back to teach scum like the Lich a lesson. Pierre whispered, too far away to hear what they were saying. Isabelle, pressing her hand to her chest, tried to catch at least a word. Duller shouted that it was impossible. After attacking the guy, Lich shouted, Lucas Troman is dead. The magician grinned. After all, Duller looks best from behind. A bright bluish light flashed. The Lich wheezed. Lucas tore the heart out of his chest. In Troman's hand was the undead life machine. If this thing was not destroyed, the Lich would not die. Duller screamed in desperation for Lucas to stop. High in the sky, the Lich's body shone as he once was, with a hole gaping in his chest. The undead began to disintegrate with a scream. Soon the wind carried away the last particles of the immortal Lich's ashes. Lucas clutched in his fist what had once been Duller's heart. The Archmage's face was impassive, without a shadow of emotion. Pierre said thoughtfully, Frey really did defeat the Lich, somehow even too easily. The pirates were horrified at what would happen to them. Their powerful ally was killed. The leader of the bandits did not understand why the Lich died, even though he was immortal. And then the menacing figure of Lucas appeared behind the red-haired bandit. The young man reminded the pirate that the negotiations were over, so it was better not to say anything. Troman calmly said that all the pirates would die here. The magician unleashed his wrath on the bloodthirsty pirates. Soon the entire deck was strewn with the bodies of sea robbers. The bandit leader screamed in pain after losing his right arm. Lucas stood in the middle of the battlefield, looking like an angel of vengeance. Seeing that one of the pirates was alive, he attacked him again. The magician looked around carefully. None of the villains should survive. The students and the ship's crew watched their savior in silence. Isabelle couldn't believe that a freshman had done all this. Finally, the ship arrived at the port, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Everyone was vying with each other to discuss how Frey had incredible strength. Pierre June stepped towards the travelers. The young man told Frey that he admired his behavior. Lucas turned around and walked away silently. But Pierre did not lag behind the magician. Bowing low, June told Frey that thanks to him, he remained alive and he would never forget it. Embarrassed, Isabelle asked Pierre to raise his head. Lucas looked at the young aristocrat with interest. Finally, the magician sighed and asked Pierre how he felt. After destroying the Lich's magic, you probably feel like everything inside you is twisted. Jun replied that everything was fine. On the contrary, there was relief after the accumulated blood came out. With a wink, Troman said the boy was bluffing. Pierre asked Frey what really happened to him. He, a first-year student, easily dealt with the Lich, who was too tough even for the royal magicians. Frey was previously considered the most untalented student at West Road Academy. June wondered if Frey had been hiding his abilities all this time. Lucas answered casually, "If so, so what? There are different situations in life." Pierre looked very carefully at the unusual young man. The magician's face, as always, was impenetrable. Jun shrugged. The young man had the right not to explain anything. He said thoughtfully, "That's also true." Pierre invited Frey to visit their clan sometime. He would like to thank the savior. Isabel couldn't believe it. Frey had received a personal invitation to June's clan. The girl knew that many people dream of such luck. The magician casually replied that he would take a look, perhaps if he had time. Isabel hissed that Blake was crazy. This is June's clan. Many aristocrats are trying to find a connection with them. And then it dawned on Lucas. Turning to June, he asked Pierre to lend him 20 gold pieces. Isabel clenched her fists and tried to stop Frey. She tried to shame her companion, but he reminded her that it was she who had not taken a penny with her. Pierre said that there was no problem with that, but what did they need the money for? Frey explained that he wanted to use the teleporter, which was very expensive. June smiled. So that's why Blake was walking towards the capital. Pierre put gold coins in Frey's hand, saying that it was a sign of gratitude, so he didn't need to return it. The magician was stunned. He had 300 gold coins in his hands. He told Pierre that he didn't need that much. 20 would be enough. But June smiled. He didn't have any small change. Lucas laughed. What a bourgeois. June really wanted to invite Frey over right now, but wedding preparations were underway at home. Troman asked cheerfully, "June must be proud of this." Pierre answered sheepishly, "It's not such a fun activity. My father-in-law does that." Lucas walked in silence for a while. Unexpectedly, he asked Pierre if his fiancée had a sister his aunt would also do. June said that this is a man from the kingdom of Rua Noble. Pierre's bride was the daughter of the Aquarid clan, which produced many outstanding knights, but the young man doubted whether she was right for him. If they had found out that the groom was weak in magic, they would have been disappointed in Pierre. Isabel reminded that Pierre was one of the top students at the academy, and not at all weak. Truman told Pierre not to lose heart. Actually, June is a handsome guy, so everything will be fine. Isabel called Frey a blockhead, saying that he had nothing but bad thoughts in his head. The boys' squabbles amused Pierre immensely. Seeing Isabel clinging to Frey, June laughed out loud. The young aristocrat laughed until he cried. Having calmed down, he said that he hadn't laughed like that for a long time. They were very funny guys. Chatting casually, the company reached a large stone bridge. Pierre told Frey that he would say goodbye to them here. June once again invited Frey to come over and not make him look like an ungrateful fool. Lucas repeated that he would drop by if he had time. Pierre looked intently at his savior once more. Lucas liked this guy. After all, the future of magic is not so hopeless. Isabel looked at these strong guys with a smile. The girl suddenly thought how good the two looked, as if they were good old friends. Troman noticed that he was a normal guy. Aristocrats should be exactly like that. Laughing, the magician added, "Pierre also spends a lot of money." Isabel blushed and shook with anger. The girl angrily blurted out that Frey would apologize for not having a penny. Isabel twirled in front of the mirror, trying on knightly outfits. The girl asked Frey with a smile if he thought it was beautiful. The magician winced and said, "Maybe it would be better to be naked then." He told his companion to choose something light so that nothing would get in the way and it would be possible to change quickly. Isabel was offended. She knows everything herself. There are just a lot of beautiful things, and she wants to try them on once. The salesman noticed that the girl was not used to such trips, and Lucas already regretted taking her with him. Having bought everything they needed, the magician and his companion moved on. Lucas acquired weapons and comfortable equipment. He was also pleased with the bag of dimensions. No matter how you look at it, it was a cool thing. Isabel was surprised that this was the first time Frey had seen something like this. It wasn't such a novelty. Troman noticed that the girl was in a bad mood. Lucas sighed. These places were familiar to him. After thousands of years, the population here had clearly increased. Still, technology is more advanced than in his time. Take the same teleport. Although progress over 4,000 years is quite natural, the magician thought that the demigod had deliberately hindered the development of civilization. Is the monster really afraid that humanity will become stronger? But he considers people to be bugs. Isabel asked what Frey was thinking so deeply about. The girl said that they arrived at the place where the teleports are located. Truman decided that he would ask the demigod about everything when they met. The duty officer announced that teleportation would begin soon, and asked not to go outside the magic circle. Lucas looked around in admiration. How wonderful it was. The amount of mana required for teleportation is measured in stones. Not bad. The travelers approached the device, and a magic circle began to spin above them. The magician warned the girl that she might feel sick if she wasn't used to it. Isabel was irritated by Frey's comments, but then the shift began. Everything swam before the girl's eyes. A bright light flashed and high-tech magic began. A corridor for movement appeared in the space above the teleport. A second later, the teleport was empty and the people had moved. The receiving device glowed with mana, warning of the arrival of guests. Soon, new arrivals appeared in the magic circle. Lucas was absolutely delighted. Here they found themselves near the mountains of testing. A hint of sadness flashed in the magician's eyes. It had been so long since he had been here. These places have not changed a bit even after 4,000 years. Lucas called Isabel. Suddenly he saw that she was ill. After teleportation, the girl vomited. Drying herself, Isabel said sheepishly that she simply hadn't eaten anything since morning. If you fill your stomach with something, everything will be fine. The magician once again wondered why he had taken her with him. The travelers went into a tavern to have a hearty meal. The elderly innkeeper was tidying up the bar. Lucas, after thinking about it, the magician ordered another glass of beer. Isabel was furious. What other beer? God forbid. Troman asked her to be quiet. She can't even imagine how long it has been since he drank beer. Lucas wondered why they didn't sell beer at the academy. While they were arguing, the innkeeper brought Frey's order. Having placed a plate of meat on the table, the innkeeper asked Frey if they were mercenaries. Seeing the food, the satisfied magician thanked the owner. The innkeeper remarked that, judging by the fact that the guests were about to go to the mountains of testing, they were new to this business. With their new chainmail and new sword, they think they can catch the dragon right now. Lucas took a sip of beer with relish. The innkeeper sighed. Courage is for the young. That's not bad. The elderly man told the children to return home after dinner. The mountain trials were too much for them. Isabel had heard that this place was called a monster paradise, and that it was quite dangerous. The innkeeper asked what they knew. The girl looked questioningly at her interlocutor. The tavern patrons were quietly talking to each other, wondering if the boys were really going to go to the mountains of testing. Lucas didn't pay attention to anyone. He was enjoying his food. The innkeeper said that he had a son who was like them. So when he saw Frey and Isabel, he remembered his story too. The girl asked the innkeeper where his son was now. He replied bitterly, his boy died in the mountains of trial. The son guarded the mother and daughter who went to get herbs. One daughter returned and told the innkeeper about the death of his son. The man advised not to go to these mountains, as they say, it is pure hell. Isabella's huge eyes were a mixture of fear and sympathy. Troman sighed contentedly. He had eaten so well. Turning to the owner, Lucas asked him to tell him about the monsters that live in the mountains. Isabel decided to try the hot stick. The girl was surprised at the strange taste. The innkeeper sighed heavily. Looking at the young man, he asked if they really needed to go there. The man cursed. He wouldn't be able to get a good night's sleep today. Finally, Frey and Isabel emptied all their plates of food. The owner brought a detailed map of the mountains and told us everything he knew. The travelers listened attentively. Isabel was terrified. She was prepared for anything, but not for this. Lucas thanked the innkeeper for the story and asked how much they owed. The man replied that he didn't need money. They would give it back when they returned alive. The magician thanked the owner for the dinner, especially for the sausages. It was already deep night outside. The man, seeing the guests off, said that many people say that only the beer is tasty, the rest is so-so. The innkeeper promised that if the boys returned, he would cook them much tastier sausages. Lucas smiled and said they would hope so. The man wished them luck. A full, bright moon rose over the mountains of trials. The magician and his companion headed into the thicket teeming with monsters. Soon the travelers fought with tree monsters. Lucas was happy to get some exercise and was enjoying the fight. The beautiful Isabel also did not stay away from the battle. In battles, the girl increasingly developed her magical skills. Having finished with the monsters, Isabella sighed. Troman looked around carefully to see if there was any other threat. Isabel's legs were buckling. They had only just entered, and there were already so many strong monsters. She understood why Frey brought her here. In such a place, a month of training is enough for good training. The magician, stepping forward, replied that the girl was wrong. Would he really have brought her here to catch some small fry? Lucas said he was going to Shuhei's dungeon. Isabel was surprised that this was the same one that the great sage Shuhei had created. According to legend, by finding it, one can gain the power to rule the entire world. The magician smiled. Even though the place is called a dungeon, it is not a cave. Lucas remembered their last meeting. Shuhei told him where he would wait for him. It is a mountain above the clouds, a beautiful lake on top and a small island in that lake. If a lake is located on the top of a mountain, it is probably volcanic. The place is quite to Shuhei's liking. He just needs to find a small island. Lucas answered the girl. Although this is a legend, there is no exaggeration in it. This is a very dangerous place. You must be at least level 6 to fight there. Seeing the girl's surprise, the magician said that they had a month. During this period they will break through to this level. Isabel exclaimed that Frey was out of his mind, and that it would take several decades. But the magician didn't listen to her first. They needed to find a suitable place to train. He suggested that the girl look for a good place to concentrate mana. The sky was gilded by dawn, the restless night was over. Soon the travelers were attacked by new monsters. Isabel no longer felt panic at their appearance. The girl fought bravely with monsters, like a real magician. Turning to Frey, she noticed something had caught his attention. Gradually they got used to the battles. But where is he looking anyway? The magician smiled and replied, he found it. The girl followed her companion's gaze to understand what he was talking about. Isabel gasped in delight at how beautiful it was. They approached a huge mountain waterfall. A wide stream of water blocked the entrance to a wide cave. Lucas walked in boldly. He knew the place very well. The magician created a glowing ball as a lamp. He announced that they would train in this place for a month. The mage told Isabel that he would show her Kassajan's teaching method. It's called struggle. The girl really wanted to know it. Lucas warned me that he hadn't shown it before because it was very dangerous. If you repeat it thoughtlessly, you can lose your life. So at first, she just needs to watch. The magician began to concentrate his mana. Soon he was hanging in the air, meditating, the space around him glowing. Isabel looked at her classmate with her mouth open. Lucas was attracted to the energy of the water falling from the mountain. The waterfall obediently sparkled. A huge flow of energy headed straight into the cave under the waterfall. Streams of energy flew towards Lucas and concentrated in him. Surprised, Isabel saw a clot of energy gather inside the young man. It was as if he was absorbing these endless streams. Lucas absorbed mana from all over the Trial Mountain. Isabel couldn't believe he was collecting the dungeon's mana. The clot of energy inside Troman grew brighter and stronger. Night fell outside the cave. Then the sunny day came again. All this time, the magician continuously absorbed the energy of the mountain. Lucas's eyes were closed. Finally, the magician came out of meditation. He was all glowing with mana. He sighed and said that the preparations were now complete. And then Troman looked at his companion in surprise. Isabel glowed, following his example. She too was filled with mana. The magician's mouth fell open in surprise. Smiling, he said that Isabel's abilities exceeded all his expectations. And what's more important, she has a thirst for knowledge. Lucas suddenly noticed that his companion was very beautiful. The magician smiled broadly and blushed slightly. He said cheerfully that Isabel was quite nice. The girl jumped to the side in fear. Lucas laughed and offered to eat. Isabel could not understand this strange young man he attracted and frightened her at the same time. The magician opened the bag of measurement that he liked so much, all the supplies he had swirled before him. Troman got what they needed now. He handed the girl some snacks, but she replied that she was not hungry. Lucas countered, she's filled with mana, so she seems full. You have to eat, even if you have to force yourself. The magician spread out camping mats for himself and his companion. Obeying the magician, Isabel thoughtfully chewed the dried meat. Lucas, comfortably settled on the rug, was also eating a snack. Until recently, the girl could not even imagine that she and Frey would live like this. She said she felt an unusual energy in her companion. After a short silence, Isabel added that Frey hadn't been himself lately. The girl had a feeling that Frey knew exactly where to go, and there is not the slightest hesitation in it. Suddenly Lucas asked Isabel, so where is the real him? The girl was embarrassed she was tormented by this question. Laughing, she asked where the real one was. The magician answered thoughtfully, people don't change, they just grow. Lucas sighed and fell into thought. The girl cheerfully added that she had to thank him for the changes. Before, I would have done these training sessions with him alone, and then it dawned on her that she would have to spend a whole month with him. The girl felt hot, the two of them in this narrow cave. Lucas barked, stop worrying about trifles. He told me he wasn't interested in minors. Isabel pursed her lips, an unpleasant feeling coming over her. Turning to the young man, she asked what he was doing. He replied that he was setting up a protective field. It would be unpleasant if monsters ran in while they were sleeping. The magician said that he would sleep, and advised the girl to also get a good night's sleep. Soon Lucas fell asleep peacefully, stretched out on the rug. Isabel looked at him with resentment. It seemed like a relief, but for some reason she wanted to hit him once. Outside the cave, a new sunny day dawned. Isabel didn't even notice how she fell asleep in the cave to the sound of water. Opening her eyes, the girl realized that the night was already over. Lucas asked her if they had slept well. The magician sat on the mat, ready to train. Isabel asked how long he slept. Lucas replied, about 5 hours. He said that this was the last rest, and that real training would begin today. And now the battle will begin, Kassajan's technique. The magician repeated that this was a very dangerous way of training. There is no need to repeat it thoughtlessly first. Isabel should simply observe. Lucas concentrated a clot of mana in the center of his body. Isabel saw something happening to the mana. The energy flows seemed to split. Soon the mana gathered again, but it looked very unusual. The girl was shocked. He divides the mana collected in the body into fire and water. Mana is in conflict and fighting with itself. It was as if a war had begun in a small space called the body. And indeed, two powerful elements were fighting within Lucas's body. The right side of the body was under the power of water. Here, powerful water desperately defended its borders from fire, but the furious flames continued to advance. The left side of the magician's body was under the control of fire. To ensure that neither side is superior, the balance must be adjusted very seriously. It's like adjusting a scale so that there is no imbalance. Isabel whispered, "What an amazing way to train." Could this really be the mysterious struggle? The girl watched attentively as her companion trained. Isabel understood perfectly well that this method was not easy. Sighing, she decided to follow Frey's example. The girl felt the energy inside her body gather into a clot. Now we need to divide the energy of different natures into streams. After some effort, Isabel realized she could do it. Soon, a struggle between two elements began inside the girl's body. Suddenly, Isabel vomited. She felt incredible pain and fell to the cave floor. Isabel remembered the magician's words: if the balance was disturbed even a little, it would be very painful. Looking at Frey, she couldn't understand how he could train so calmly, as if he were meditating. The girl again wondered who he really was. While the young man was training, Isabel decided to swim in the clear water of the lake near the cave. She was not good at fighting, but she was used to washing regularly. There was no one nearby, and the girl could dry off in peace. She took out some spare clothes and changed. To understand how long they have been here, Isabel came up with a stone calendar. Small stones represented days, large weeks. As soon as she had 7 small ones, she would exchange them for 1 large one. The girl placed the second large stone. So, it's been about 2 weeks since they've been here, and Frey didn't even move during all this time. Isabel didn't understand how long these terrible training sessions would continue. The girl returned to the training cave. Having settled down on the rug, she put the towel back in place, and suddenly her attention was drawn to the motionless figure of Frey. Suddenly, waves of water began to dance around him. Isabel couldn't believe her eyes. It was the materialization of mana. This means that the young man reached the 6th star in just 2 weeks. Is it really possible for a human being to grow at such an incredible rate? None of the currently living magicians are definitely capable of this. But Lucas was unhappy. It was too slow. It needed to be faster. The training needed to be more effective. Looking at the young man, Isabel decided to return to training. If he can do it, then she should be able to do it too. The girl once again concentrated the clot of mana in her body. Outside the cave at this time, a torrential rain began to fall. The two mages were oblivious to everything as they trained in the cave. There were already 3 large stones on Isabel's stone calendar. This means that Borba's training lasted more than 3 weeks. Thanks to the girl's persistence, she also made noticeable progress. However, she vomited periodically and experienced terrible pain. But despite everything, Isabel did not give up. She realized that if she lost concentration for just a moment, the balance would collapse. She still found it difficult to believe that such growth was possible. This Kasagina method requires a lot of patience and endurance. Suddenly, Isabel felt an unusual smell. Could it really be that she smelled like that? She turned towards the entrance to the cave. Something was happening on the threshold. The girl realized that the barrier was collapsing, and that someone from outside wanted to get in. Suddenly, Frey's magical protection shattered. A flaming giant appeared in front of the frightened girl. Isabel didn't understand who it was and what she should do. Inside the cave, there was a huge bird with fiery feathers. Lucas stopped training and quietly opened his eyes. Rising from the carpet, he said it was a phoenix. The girl was taken aback. But doesn't he belong to a rare divine species? Truman admired the beautiful, strong bird. The magician loved phoenixes very much. Isabel looked at the amazing creature in confusion. She assumed that all sorts of monsters lived in the mountains of testing, but I couldn't even imagine that I would meet someone of divine appearance here. Lucas said that the phoenix was attracted by the massive amount of mana released by the struggle. The magician called the phoenix. The girl exclaimed that it was dangerous. Isabel was sure that divine monsters were not something that could be tamed by humans. Phoenix looked at Truman carefully. Looking at the bird, the magician said that the phoenix came here for help. The girl looked at Frey with apprehension. Will this strange student really approach the phoenix? The magician hugged the huge bird and stroked its head. Lucas gently ruffled the bird's bright plumage. Phoenix closed his eyes trustingly, as if he had met an old friend. Isabel couldn't believe it. The phoenix's feathers were made of flame, and Frey was just stroking it. The magician replied that it was all because the phoenix did not see him as an enemy. Lucas showed the girl that there were wounds on the bird's chest, inflicted by some kind of giant claws. A little more, and the claws would have pierced the heart. The phoenix survived only thanks to a miracle. Isabel looked at the miracle bird in amazement. She asked if phoenixes ever die. The magician explained that, unlike other creatures, phoenixes are freed when they die. But this does not mean they are immortal. The girl came a little closer to this living miracle. What in these places could have inflicted such a severe wound on the deity? It seems the phoenix has encountered an opponent it cannot handle. While petting the phoenix, Lucas told him that everything was fine. Apparently, he knew that Lucas could help him. The magician smiled. The phoenix reminded him of his previous life. The divine bird looked at the magician very carefully. Feeling that the man understood everything, the phoenix closed its eyes. Lucas channeled mana into the bird to heal its wounds. Isabel was stunned. He was treating the phoenix as if it were a little bird. The magician said that through training he could completely cure the phoenix. Opening its eyes, the bird answered Lucas. The magician told the phoenix to lie still and everything would pass. Isabel noticed that Frey became completely different next to the phoenix. His expression changed. Even the manner of speech now is not what the girl had become accustomed to. It seems that even the air around has become softer and more comfortable. Lucas remembered his last encounter with the phoenix. It was raining then too. The young magician didn't believe that some rain could stop the phoenix. Phoenix then became angry with Troman. The magician then suggested that his fiery friend catch up with him. Lucas whispered, memories flooding back. A long time ago, he had already met someone of the phoenix species. Magic flowed over the wounded divine bird. The claw marks on the phoenix's chest were healing before our eyes. Isabel wondered if Frey developed his healing skills further, whether he could achieve immortality. Soon the phoenix stood firmly on its huge paws again. Spreading his giant wings, he thanked the magician with a cry. Stroking the bird's beak, Lucas thanked the phoenix for the pleasant memories. The divine creation looked at the savior without taking his eyes off him. It occurred to Lucas that this was the same phoenix. The firebird flew out of the cave, passing the waterfall. A bright golden flash flashed across the gloomy sky. Lucas saw that the phoenix had left its feather on the cave floor. He grumbled, "What an idiot. So what did he mean by that? These feathers heal wounds, are used to create magical artifacts, and are also very expensive." Putting the feather back in his pouch, Lucas grumbled the phoenix wasn't one to like to remain in debt. Unlike someone who just ate and messed around all day, Isabel flared up. It was Frey, apparently, who was now talking about one girl. Maybe I should have asked her first, like all normal people do. Instead of answering, Lucas immersed himself in his training again. Isabel sighed and looked around. Beyond the water curtain of the cave, the rain continued to pour. But soon the bad weather ended, and the sun shone over the mountains of the test. The foliage, refreshed by the rain, became even brighter. Large stones were arriving on Isabel's calendar. They had been training in the cave for more than 4 weeks. The girl collected fresh water from the spring and returned to the cave. The 4th week has already passed. It seemed that Frey was about to dry up completely. He hadn't had a drop of blood in his blood since last week. Isabel was a little worried about him. It really looked dangerous. But on the other hand, his image evoked a feeling of the presence of something mystical or even divine. The girl thought how strange he was. Frey seems to be very strong, but completely ill-mannered. At times he seemed cold-blooded and calculating to her, and sometimes tender and soft, like with the phoenix. This young man evoked conflicting feelings in Isabel, as if he were a wise, great archmage. Here he is again, when he trains motionless. But Isabel loved and respected Frey Blake with all her heart. Lucas walked out of practice and took a deep breath. The girl looked with wide eyes at the young man who had lost a lot of weight. He has changed incredibly much this month. The magician carefully opened his eyes. He rose to his feet, swaying, mana streaming around him. Isabel couldn't believe her eyes. He really did it. She congratulated Frey. In just 1 month, he reached the 6th star. Frey's frail body had changed a lot during that month, but Lucas was still dissatisfied. Isabel kept her eyes on him. It was impossible to believe the sight, even if you looked at it point blank. The youngest mage to reach the 6th star was 35 years old. If word gets out that an academy student did the same thing, the world will turn upside down. Lucas can now gather mana by simply breathing. Suddenly, the magician's head began to spin, and everything began to swim before his eyes. Isabel caught the falling Frey. He completely forgot that he hadn't eaten anything for a whole week. The girl asked if she could give him some dried meat, but Lucas suggested going hunting. His body needed refueling. Concerned, Isabel asked if he was okay. Coming out of the cave, the magician and his companion saw a strange picture. Not far from their shelter lay mountains of slain monsters. Isabel asked, confused, what had happened here. Lucas realized it was a phoenix, so they weren't bothered by monsters during their training. The girl smiled. It seemed like the phoenix was protecting them. The magician remembered telling the bird that through training he could completely cure it. So this stingy phrase left a mark on the phoenix's soul. Maybe they will meet again. Lucas decided that there was no need to hunt. They could eat the killed monsters and go to Shuhei's dungeon. Suddenly they heard a desperate cry of a man. Troman looked around cautiously. Isabel looked around in surprise, wondering where these people were coming from. But it was definitely a human scream, and somewhere nearby. Lucas, although he was hungry, decided to see what was going on. Pushing off the ground, the magician flew towards the voice. Confused, Isabel didn't even have time to say anything. She called after Frey, but there was no answer. The girl didn't understand what she was supposed to do here alone. A knife was thrust into the body of a prisoner tied to a tree. The unfortunate man, shedding tears, begged his tormentors to spare him. Opposite the prisoner stood a bandit named Victor, throwing knives at him. Several prisoners had already been killed, with throwing blades sticking out of them. The robbers egged on the thrower, laughing when he missed. The bandit grumbled, saying that it was all because of the hangover. The broad-shouldered brute took the knife from the thrower, saying that it was now his turn to throw. The bandits began arguing over who would throw the knife at the prisoner. The leader of the group cursed. "When will this woman appear? More than a month has already passed." The robber grumbled about how much longer they had to hang around in these fucking mountains. Grabbing a knife, the big guy shouted for everyone to look here. Now he will show who is the master here. The prisoner howled in fear. The satisfied bandit shouted that he would hit the bull's eye, and indeed the knife flew straight towards the captive's head. Another second, and the knife will pierce the unfortunate man right through. But suddenly the blade changed its trajectory. The knife turned and flew away from the tied-up man. To the bandit's surprise, the blade fell to the ground away from the victim. No one could understand what just happened. The bandit patted Juan on the shoulder and laughingly noted that the wind was not on his side. Juan growled angrily at how he could have missed. Suddenly the skinny robber saw a fair-haired guy next to him. Victor asked the young man who he was. Grabbing a crooked knife, the bandit swore and repeated the question. Juan picked up the knife and also headed towards Lucas. The magician looked around. These bastards killed all the prisoners. Now they want to kill this man too. It would be even better to finish him off. The prisoner is already wounded. Those guys were still alive not long ago, until they became targets for darts. Here are the next candidates for the role of bad guys. Victor asked Lucas with a grin if he could speak. Armed Juan quietly crept up to the magician. To everyone's surprise, Victor's head flew off his shoulders. A stunned Juan watched as his comrade's body flew in one direction and his head in the other. The big guy screamed as he felt Victor's blood on himself. The bandits opened their mouths in surprise. The elder realized that they had angered some magician. A white axe appeared from the heavenly portal. The magical weapon easily cut off the head of the sharp-tongued Victor. White flashes glittered right above the heads of the robbers. Finally, the axe disappeared. The elder understood that this was 5th-level magic. It seemed the kid had used a line of light. Lucas glanced at the silent bandits. After greeting them, the magician said that it was time to teach the boys a lesson. After waiting a bit, Isabel decided to follow Frey. The girl was horrified. The entire clearing was strewn with corpses. Frey stood calmly among the slain bandits. The young man was thinking about something. Isabel asked if he had really killed everyone, and the magician replied that he had left one alive. The companions looked at the wounded group leader. Lucas was sure that this was just an ordinary henchman, which meant they had a leader. The girl asked if Frey was really going to burn them all. He replied that he could not turn a blind eye to the fact that they were killing innocent people. If a demigod really enjoys watching people hate and kill each other, then Lucas will scatter these ashes. No matter how trivial the things that make a demigod happy, listing them is disgusting. Suddenly, Lucas and Isabel heard the prisoner's faint voice. He asked the guys if they would save him. The magician replied that he could not take him with him. He had lost too much blood. The man tearfully begged not to leave him here. The prisoner cried that he could not die like this. The prisoner's whole body shook. He wanted to apologize to his dear father before he died. Lucas glanced sideways at the unfortunate man. The bandit leader was indignant. Was the 3rd platoon really captured by a ghost? The robber glared angrily at the speaker. Finally, Captain Karlst asked if the bandit was drunk, but he swore that it was true. He saw everything with his own eyes. He had long hair, appeared suddenly, and unleashed all his anger on them. This was definitely not an ordinary guy. It was impossible to get close to him. In an instant, the entire group became corpses. He was the only one who managed to escape. Karlst thought about it. So it was a magician. The assistant confirmed it. Absolutely, definitely. The bespectacled man added that he seemed capable of a double throw. Captain Karlst realized it was a battle mage. The assistant agreed with the boss. The leader stood up and commanded that the borders be strengthened. As soon as this ghost appears, you need to immediately give a signal. Karlst ordered that measures be taken in advance and that an attack be carried out at the first report. Glasses asked if this magician was hired by the Aquarid family. The captain laughed. No, they are too arrogant. The leader asked the survivor if they were playing human darts again. What kind of people were they playing with? The bandit replied. They were ordinary mercenaries. These mercenaries were accompanying 2 women. They definitely couldn't hire a battle mage. Karlst cursed. Who the hell is this magician? There was a broken carriage lying in the middle of the forest. Numerous knights were dying around with groans. The entire retinue of the noble lady was killed by bandits. Karlst asked not to look at him like that. He feels weak. He had been looking for the eldest daughter of the famous knight's family, Sonia Aquarid, for so long. Armed robbers rushed at the girl. Armed with a sword, Sonia Aquarid fought back bravely. 3 bandits were unable to overcome her. One of them, smiling greasily, approached the girl. A swing of the sword, and the impudent fellow lost half his head. Having repelled the attack, Sonia caught her breath. For a couple of seconds, the warrior's sword fell to the ground. But seeing Karlst, the girl took up her sword again and shouted for the enemy to die. But the bandit looked at the heiress of the knightly family with a smile. Instead of the boss, the captain's assistant crossed swords with Sonia. The girl didn't expect the bespectacled man to be a strong opponent. The captain's assistant threw Sonia away with a strong blow. The girl slowed down with the help of her sword. After numerous attacks, Aquarid was already noticeably exhausted. Karlst exclaimed that he was enchanted, while Sonia, meanwhile, did not let go of the knife. It seems that the fire sword from the Ruanable kingdom is not just empty boasting. 2 nuns behind Sonia called out to their mistress with tears in their eyes. The old knight also called to her. Sonia took up the sword. She was ready to fight to the end. Captain Karlst looked at the rich heiress with a smirk. The nuns looked in horror at the robbers who surrounded them. The old knight was in despair. Karlst licked his lips. It was worth waiting more than a month in these damned mountains. Sonia Aquarid is truly beautiful. She is also a brilliant knight, and the king granted her the title of Torrential Rain at only 18 years old. All the knights accompanying Sonia have already been killed. Only the maids and Sir Luther remained. But Luther has long since retired, and the only person capable of fighting is Sonia. She will have to compete with 20 talented men. The girl swore. This is the worst-case scenario. Karlst asked where their accompanying magician was. Sonia was outraged by the nonsense the bandit was talking. The Aquarid Knight's house won't hire a mage to accompany them. They're all weaklings these days. Karlst knew it. That guy wasn't connected to the Aquarid family. The captain was very curious to know what kind of person this ghost was. Karlst told Sonia to relax. He wouldn't kill her right away. The girl asked what he was talking about. The captain licked his lips. Does she really want him to explain what needs to happen? The girl was horrified by such a prospect. The bandits began to make a joyful noise. They would have fun with the daughter of a noble family. Sonia clenched her teeth and growled that this was nonsense. She would rather bite her tongue than become their toy. Karlst chuckled and said it wouldn't make much of a difference. If Sonia dies, the 2 sisters behind her will be able to play with them. They've been waiting for them for over a month, so the boys are very hungry. Karlst concluded that Sonia Aquarid would not be able to die beautifully. Sonia gritted her teeth. Creatures, so that's why they left those girls alive. The trembling nuns huddled close to each other. They whispered that they would not drag their mistress down. The crying nuns looked boldly at Sonia. The wounded Luther said that it would be an honor for him to die for Lady Sonia. The old knight sighed deeply. The girl looked at her subjects with regret. She sighed heavily. It was all her fault. Turning to the servants, Sonia asked them for forgiveness. The girl said that her incompetence led to their all deaths. The nuns begged the lady not to speak like that. There was nothing to regret. Young Aquarid lowered her head sadly. And suddenly everyone heard the nuns' request. They begged the lady to end their lives with her own hands. If they are defiled, they will not be able to meet worthily in heaven. Sonia's hand shook, but she agreed, firmly saying that their chests should be full of pride. Karlst's face fell. What are they talking about? Sonia exclaimed. For the honor of the 2 maidens, and for the honor of the House of Aquarid, she would do it. She, Sonia Aquarid, gratefully sees them off on their new journey. The captain ordered the bandits to stop her immediately. Sonia raised her sword over the heads of the faithful nuns. With tears streaming down her face, young Aquarid dealt the fatal blow. The shocked bandits opened their mouths. They didn't expect this. Sonia was in tears. But suddenly, through the veil of tears, she saw a strange picture. Sonia's eyes widened in surprise. Both nuns were alive and unharmed. And then the warrior discovered with horror that her sword was missing. She couldn't understand where her family's sword had disappeared to. She gritted her teeth and glanced sideways at the bandits. Who would have thought that these bandits would be so skilled? Sonia cursed. It looked like she would have to endure the most terrible humiliation for a night. Turning to the nuns, she apologized for not being able to provide them with a dignified death. Aquarid ordered them to bite their tongues. Suddenly, Sonia saw a stranger nearby. Karlst smiled. The mysterious ghost had finally revealed itself. A stunned Sonia saw that the stranger was holding her sword. Along with Lucas, Isabel and the wounded bandit prisoner stood near the young Aquarid. The warrior, with her mouth open, looked at the people who had appeared out of nowhere. The nuns, huddled close to each other, were silent. Sir Luther tried to understand whether these were enemies or friends. A man wounded by the bandits hung on Isabel's shoulders. The captain told the magician that he had heard rumors about him, and it was he who took care of his guys. Throwing a sword to Sonia, Lucas asked Karlst if he was their leader. Lady Aquarid, taking the sword, looked at the young man in confusion. The leader of the bandits literally glared at the guy. It seemed like he was an ordinary skinny guy in front of them. The captain asked the magician. He came from there, from above. That's where the bandits' base camp was located. Karlst's face darkened and he asked menacingly what the boy had done to his people. Lucas smiled. The leader knew himself. He took good care of them. Karlst's face twisted with anger. He shouted at the bandits to kill this freak immediately and not give him time to use magic. According to reports, this guy should be a battle mage. The bandit believed that the magician had no chance against numerical superiority. But as soon as the enemies approached, they were met with a magical attack. White arrows tore apart the most zealous bandits. The captain fought off the arrows and watched in horror as his men died. Karlst's hands shook. He didn't expect to see the firepower. The captain looked around in confusion. White magic arrows killed and maimed his seasoned warriors. An explosion occurred at the place where the group of bandits was standing. Sonia Aquarid watched with her mouth open as her enemies perished. The young aristocrat asked the strangers who they were and what their purpose was. Isabel smiled and told Sonia that they could now rest easy. The magician's companion added that they were not their enemies. The bandit leader continued to fight off the magic arrows. The captain knew a little about battle mages. He was sure that the young man would not last long, because there was a cycle of magic spells. This guy's skills really impressed Karlst. He believed that the mage was focusing on him. The bandit waited for the guy to collapse from exhaustion, and then Karlst's men would get to him. The leader clearly decided to kill the boy, but time passed, and the attack of white arrows did not stop. The bandits died one after another before the commander's eyes. Many began to panic, but even those fleeing were caught by magical weapons. Captain Karlst whispered that it was impossible. Where did this skinny guy get so much fighting power? The leader shouted at the magician how he could use so much energy at once. The main bandit was sure that it was impossible to use magic for so long. Everything around the young man was shining. He had no shortage of energy. Karlst had never heard of anything like this. The leader's sword broke and he fell helplessly to the ground. The captain was scared. A little more and he would die. Leaning on the broken piece of his sword, Karlst begged the mage to stop. Lucas stopped the magical attack. Several of the leader's henchmen began to rise with groans. Many robbers were wounded. Even more were killed. Karlst was surprised. The magician no longer attacks them. The captain shouted that the boy had run out of mana and ordered that he be captured. The leader warned that if they didn't kill him now, everyone would die. Sonia offered to help the mage if he ran out of mana. Lucas motioned with his hand for the young lady to move away. He told her to get out of the way. It was very dangerous. A magic circle appeared in the guy's hand. At that very second, the ground around the bandits began to crack. The bandits were afraid to take even a step, and then they felt with horror that the ground beneath their feet was shaking. Captain Karlst asked in confusion what was happening, why the ground was shaking. Suddenly the leader saw that the ground under his feet was cracking. Those present couldn't believe it. It was an earthquake. The rocky ground around the bandits was breaking apart, forming huge cracks. The robbers screamed in fear that they were falling down. Despite their cries for help, the earth swallowed up the villains. Karlst desperately resisted, but he too seemed to be underground. Sonia was amazed. This young man easily dealt with an entire gang. Young Aquarid whispered that it was incredible. Soon there was no trace left of the bandits. But if it was an earthquake, then it was 5-star magic. Isabel said that the mage distracted the bandits with a spell and then used a control attack. Sonia was stunned. Could the storm of light arrows really have been a diversionary tactic? Isabel had never seen anything like it before either. Until I met this amazing guy, the girls looked at Troman in unison. Sonia Aquarid saw such a powerful magician for the first time in her life. She asked hesitantly if this young man was a battle mage. The gang was destroyed, and Lady Aquarid was able to continue her journey. The girl thanked the magician for his help. The lady introduced herself as Sonia Aquarid from the Kingdom of Ruinball. The magician replied that he was Frey Blake. It seemed he had heard this name somewhere before. The lady was surprised this young man was speaking to her informally and freely. Isabel introduced herself and apologized, saying that Frey was a man with a bad character. She asked the young man why he couldn't act as nice as he did with the Phoenix. Sonia held her nose. Maybe they were hermits living in these mountains. Sir Luther remarked thoughtfully. So this young man was from the Blake family. This is one of the most powerful that supports the Cascao Empire. The head of the Asaka Blake family is considered the 6th strongest mage of all. Waving Isabel off, Lucas asked where the boys were heading. Luther replied that they needed to go to the nearest town, Hispaniola. Lucas said that they were going there too and offered to accompany them. Sir Luther looked sadly at the dead knights. He thanked the mage for his kindness, but they needed to return the knights' bodies. It would take some time, so Luther suggested that the magician go without them. Lucas asked if they would bury them here. Luther replied with a sigh. They couldn't move them all to the city. The magician said he would do it. With a wave of his hand, he lifted all the dead bodies into the air. With his other hand, Truman picked up the pieces of the cart from the ground. To the surprise of those present, the cart began to recover. Soon the vehicle was ready and in good working order. Sonia exclaimed that this was incredible. The knights' bodies ended up in the cart, and the wounded man was hovering above them. Lucas suggested moving forward. Sir Luther stammered in agreement. The company moved slowly along the wide road into the city. The cart with the bodies, driven by magic, rolled on its own. Sonia was shocked. Frey is 20 years old, isn't he over 30? The young aristocrat couldn't believe it. The magician answered thoughtfully, 20 or 30, it doesn't matter. Lucas smiled and said it was great to be young. Truman asked if it wasn't suspicious that the bandits had been waiting for them in an ambush. Sonia remembered that the bandits said that they waited about a month to capture them. Luther added that this coincided with the time they left Ruin Bull. The Aquarid family has many allies and just as many enemies. Sonia noticed that these were very skilled mercenaries, and there were a lot of them hired. This man must be very powerful. Unexpectedly, Sonia laughed, saying that for Frey it was a mere trifle. Lady Aquarid kept her eyes on the mage. She asked the young man how he acquired such strength. Until now, Sonia thought that all magicians were weaklings. But today she has completely changed her mind. Lucas asked thoughtfully, wasn't it obvious how, through amplification? The knight's heiress looked at the magician in confusion. She repeated thoughtfully, amplification. The campaign finally arrived in the city and headed to the port. The cart with the bodies of the dead knights was loaded onto the ship. One of the nuns had to accompany the sad load. The friend said goodbye, and the sister boarded the ship. Everyone else, standing on the pier, saw the ship off. Lucas and Isabel looked sadly after the ship. Luther thanked the magician once again with his help. The knights would return to their families. The young man modestly replied that he was glad to help. Waving his hand, Lucas wished Sonia and the others a pleasant journey, but Lady Aquarid suddenly grabbed his hand. The magician asked in confusion what was going on. Sonia asked permission to thank him. Lucas smiled and said no need, they should help each other. Luther explained that if the young man left without a reason, the Aquarid family would lose face. The magician was puzzled. He nodded his head silently in agreement. Isabel smiled, and Lucas added that he wouldn't mind a little snack. He knows a place where they make very tasty sausages. The whole company went into a tavern familiar to the magician. Luther chuckled, and Lady Sonia covered her nose in disgust. The old knight remarked that this was not a suitable place for an aristocrat, but the magician objected. This sloppy and dirty restaurant is the best place. The owner of the establishment heard Lucas's remark. The innkeeper was glad to see the young man. He looked like a vagabond, but still returned alive. A pleased Truman laughed. Pointing to the captive, the magician told the owner that there was another person who had managed to survive. The stunned innkeeper froze. Tears welled up in the eyes of the prisoner hanging on Isabel. The tray of food fell from the innkeeper's shaking hands. He couldn't believe his eyes. His son Kajani stood before him. The father bandaged the wounds of his beloved son. Lucas said that the father shouldn't worry about his son's life. He was taken hostage while guarding a mother and daughter. Father and son were in tears, not believing that they were able to meet. Kajani admitted that he always regretted yelling at his father and running away. The old man reassured him everything was fine. The main thing was that he returned alive. Isabel asked the magician how he knew that he was the innkeeper's son. Lucas replied that they looked very similar. The young man smiled. It seemed that the ballast was surprisingly talented in healing magic. Isabel asked sternly who he was calling ballast. The magician replied that she was his ballast. Lucas noticed that the restaurant was crowded, and they wouldn't be able to eat. Sir Luther supported the young man. They should look for another place. Lucas sighed. That's a shame. The sausages here are delicious. Suddenly the innkeeper loudly barked for everyone to stop eating. The owner frowned and announced that they were closed today. The visitors were indignant, but the owner sent them all away. While kicking the diners out, the innkeeper said that he would not take money from them. Having cleared the hall, the owner bolted the doors. He posted a closed sign outside. The innkeeper asked what the young man was talking about. There was no one in the restaurant. The magician laughed, and the innkeeper invited everyone to sit down. It was already night outside, but the guests were still in the restaurant. Sonia went up to her room and used the bathroom. How nice it was to finally wash off the road dirt. But even in such moments, the Lady Knight practiced her blows. Finally, the girl got dressed and went down to the hall. The table was laden with delicacies. Even Cheese Luther was surprised by such an abundance and variety of meat dishes. Lucas filled his belly with pleasure. Everyone turned to look at Lady Aquarid as she descended. The magician told Sonia that he did not wait for her and had already started. The young aristocrat looked at the guy in surprise. Lucas invited the girl to sit at the table and have dinner. Suddenly, the magician noticed that Sonia's face had turned red, and he asked what had happened. She chuckled, Frey becoming more manly as he washed the dirt off himself. Suddenly, Sonia Aquarid twisted her ankle. Her cloak flew off, but the magician managed to catch the falling girl. Sonia screamed involuntarily. For a split second, Lucas and Sonia's eyes met. The magician's gaze fell on the numerous wounds on the girl's arms. He asked what kind of wounds, but Sonia pulled her hand away. All her arms were covered with numerous scars. Lucas, looking at the girl knight, said that this was very cool. These are traces of her efforts and growth. Lady Aquarid looked at the magician in surprise. Isabel heard that Sonia was heading to Castcow, but what was their final destination? Sonia replied that they were heading to June's family. Lucas asked again, puzzled. And then she and Isabel remembered Pierre's story about the wedding. He spoke about the daughter of the Aquarid clan, and doubted whether she was suitable for him. The boys exclaimed, so this must be connected with Pierre's marriage. Sonia was no less surprised than they were. Sir Luther asked if they knew Pierre. Isabel explained that Frey and Pierre study at the same academy. Pierre is their friend, and they heard about this marriage from him. Lucas asked a little sadly, so Sonia is Pierre's fiancée. Lady Aquarid looked questioningly at the magician. The young man sighed and lowered his head. At that moment, Troman was sure that Pierre was lucky. In the morning, the travelers said goodbye, and then each went their own way. Isabel wished Miss Sonia a safe journey. Lucas remained sadly silent. Sonia invited him to visit June's family when he finished his business. He remembered that he had already received a similar invitation from Pierre. The magician smiled and replied that he might come visit. Sonia laughed and said that she would wait for him. Isabel said Miss Sonia seemed to have an affinity for respectable people of noble birth. Lucas thought so too. This Pierre has been lucky all his life. But Isabel said that wasn't true. The magician asked what was wrong with her face, whether she had really caught a bug in her mouth. Stopping, Troman said that they had arrived. There was a very high mountain in front of them. Lucas said there's an entrance to Shuhei's dungeon there. The girl asked in horror if this was really the same one. The magician confirmed that it was true that this mountain was called Drake because drakes lived here. These are the largest and most powerful predators in the world of monsters. Isabel asked fearfully if they went in there and would have to fight those creatures. Lucas silently pointed his finger at the ground. Looking down, the girl was stunned. Right in front of them was the footprint of a giant lizard, the magician explained. The king of the drakes was tens of times larger than usual. Isabel screamed in horror. This can't be happening. She had never heard of such huge drakes. The magician calmly told the girl to pull herself together. These were mountains of trials. Whatever happens, there is nothing strange about it. That is why they are called the mountains of hell. Lucas created a shield. Isabel asked in confusion what he was doing. Suddenly, the magician threw the girl aside. At that very second, a blow fell on the place where Isabel stood. Troman made several jumps to the side. His companion braked and stopped. Isabel asked the magician what he was doing. Was he probably crazy? And then she saw a huge monster. The girl whispered, "It's an ogre." Lucas felt that this enemy was very dangerous. Red skin, 3 eyes, a mutant in front of them. The tavern owner said that mutants live in this place, and he wasn't lying. The monster turned its head and stopped at Isabel. Grabbing a wooden club, the ogre moved towards the girl. The magician's companion quickly prepared for the attack. Isabel sent a fireball at her enemy. There was a deafening explosion and the ogre flew to the side. Lucas smiled. Isabel's strength had grown much more than he expected. But as soon as the smoke cleared, the ogre rose to his feet. His eye flashed angrily. The monster roared deafeningly and moved towards the people again. Isabel was in despair. Her magic was useless. The ogre didn't even falter. Lucas said his skin is fire-resistant. Maybe it's the drake's fault. The ogre has evolved. The girl asked in confusion what they would do. Troman smiled. It's simple. If fire doesn't help, they use ice. Isabel suddenly felt a sharp chill. 2 ice spears appeared in the air, but it seemed as if the season had changed. The girl again thought that Frey strongly resembled the archmage Lucas Troman. He aimed ice spears at the ogre. The ice weapon bit into the mutant's body and knocked him off his feet. Lucas kept a close eye on the enemy. Suddenly, the magician and his companion saw that the attack had not helped. The enraged monster rushed at his enemies. Isabel whispered that this couldn't be. Even a blow from a powerful ice spear could not pierce this impenetrable skin. While running away from the ogre, the magician noticed that the monster was a tough guy. The girl generated a fireball again. Throwing fire into the ogre's face, Isabel delayed him a little. The angry mutant roared loudly. Clenching his giant fists, the monster looked around angrily. He couldn't understand where the impudent little people had gone. Lucas sincerely admired the excellent features that evolution had endowed the monster with. Isabel believed that at this density the fire would be most effective. Lucas reminded that his skin is fire-resistant. The girl asked if they could bury him with an earthquake. The mage warned that this would attract all the drakes in the area. Troman decided to resort to the most effective strategy. Lucas called out to the noisy ogre. The young man asked the monster why he was so angry. Isabel didn't understand why the mage was using ice spears again. Lucas thoughtfully remarked, "If you want to succeed, dig the well to the end." The magician waved his hand as usual. The mutant, growling, watched the impudent little people. Several ice spears sparkled above the young man, aimed at the ogre. The monster rushed at the people with a warlike cry. Lucas sarcastically suggested that the enemy be more restrained and not shout. The first spear flew at the mutant. The ice weapon pierced the ogre's eye on the forehead. He, the pain monster, screamed even louder. Isabel screamed that it wasn't working, but the magician demanded that she shut up. He was concentrated. Lucas took aim and sent the second spear at the ogre. It hit the first one exactly. The third spear pierced the second one. The ogre rushed forward, and a fourth spear flew towards him. 5 ice spears were already sticking out of the monster's eye, one after the other. The magician fired 2 more shots at the same point. Truman aimed the 8th spear at the ogre's forehead, saying, "This is the end." And indeed, the mutant fell silent and fell to his knees. No more ice spears were needed. The spears, reinforcing each other, pierced the monster's skull. Isabel was delighted. Everything worked out. A satisfied Lucas blew on his finger, which served as a sight. The giant ogre swayed and collapsed to the ground. This enemy was finally defeated. The magician concluded with a smile that digging one well was an excellent tactic. And then they heard a suspicious noise in the sky. A whole flock of drakes was flying towards them. Lucas cursed, and all the drakes flew towards the noise. The monsters let out war cries as they prepared to attack. Well, here's a new round. There's no time to get bored on this journey. A sea of fire fell upon the travelers. Some of the drakes were killed by ice spears. The rest poured fire on the people. Lucas and Isabel tried to escape from their terrible enemies. The girl sent an ice arrow at the monster, but the magic shot bounced off the monster's thick skin. A huge drake flew straight towards Isabel. The monster's eyes glowed with malice, but suddenly the drake received a fatal blow from a huge ice spear. Lucas quietly flew up from above and struck the monster. Anger at the little people flashed in the giant's eyes, but soon the drake's eyes went dark. The huge monster collapsed to the ground. The magician and his companion hurried to leave the battlefield. Suddenly they saw a monster of incredible size. The Drake King himself towered over them. Lucas clamped his hand over the girl's mouth to keep her from making a sound. He whispered for her to sit quietly. The magician could not defeat this enemy. Now he could only hope that he would leave. The travelers even tried to breathe as quietly as possible. The giant drake's huge eyes scanned the area. Lucas knew he could probably see them. Isabel was shaking with horror. She hiccuped as the Drake King's massive paw stepped next to them. But strangely enough, the monster passed by. Soon the monster disappeared from sight, leaving only traces. The girl sneezed because of the dust raised by the drake. Right in front of the travelers was the fresh trail of the Drake King. It was time to move on. Having settled down on the rock, Isabel began to heal her companion. The girl was surprisingly good at this type of magic. The procedure was soon completed. Isabel sighed tiredly and said that she had finished healing Frey. A moth landed on the young man's finger, and Lucas felt that his mind was completely synchronized with this body. This happened thanks to numerous battles in the Mountains of Trials. But the most important question Lucas still has to decide. The magician invited Isabel to go further. Pointing to the top of the mountain, the magician said that Shuhei's dungeon was there. One more push and they will be there. Lucas and Isabel flew to the treasured island. The magician warned the girl to let her guard down. There could be monsters in the lake too. She asked how Frey knew that Shuhei's dungeon was here. Lucas smiled. Shuhei had a bad habit of talking a lot. At the top of the mountain there is a very beautiful lake and a small island. He wanted to live in such a place. Troman exclaimed, "He found this place." The travelers landed on the shore of the lake. Isabel was genuinely delighted. This is a truly beautiful island. The girl never ceased to be surprised Frey spoke of Shuhei as if he were an old acquaintance. Lucas was overcome with anxiety, wondering if his friend was alive. Under this island there is a dungeon that is many times larger than the island itself. This island is just an entrance to the dungeon. Extravagant yet simple, so much like Shuhei. Isabel couldn't tell if it was Frey in front of her. The travelers walked slowly across the beautiful island. In the midst of the lush forest, they saw an unusually tall and powerful tree. In the middle of the wide trunk, a large hollow was visible. Lucas chuckled. Anyone could guess that this was the entrance. Shuhei even made a ladder. How nice of him. Lamps were burning on the wooden walls along the stairs. Lucas and Isabel descended deeper and deeper into the dungeon. The magician remained silent. He wanted to believe that Shuhei was still alive. The girl had a question on the tip of her tongue, but she was afraid to ask it, because this couldn't be. Isabel lowered her head, thinking that she was having some very stupid thoughts. And Troman continued to descend the stairs. Magic lamps illuminated the way for the guests. It seemed as if the dungeon had been awaiting their arrival for a long time. Finally, the stairs ended. In front of the travelers were large magical doors. Lucas touched the door with his hand. Isabel asked if he could open the doors. He replied, "This is a magic technique created by Shuhei. If they use force, they will explode immediately." The magician placed his hand on the ball located near the door. At the touch of the hand, the ball began to glow. The glow became stronger and stronger. Suddenly, white energy began to swirl above the ball. A frightened Isabel asked what the smoke was. The energy gathered into a clot, and something was forming from it. Suddenly, young Shuhei appeared in front of the guests. The boy winked at the people and asked if they could hear him. The girl muttered, "What a strange child, what is going on?" Isabel looked at Frey in confusion. He was sad, shaking slightly, and the boy exclaimed, "Welcome to my dungeon." He is sure that in front of him are true magicians who came here to get something. Lucas extended a shaking hand towards the cheerful boy. The magician's hand passed through the young Shuhei. The girl said, "It seemed to be a greeting recorded with mana." Lucas said excitedly, "So frivolous. Shuhei is already an old man. How old is he to behave like this?" The magician said sadly that he was pleased to see Shuhei straw. Isabel was amazed that this child was Shuhei. The boy asked what the guests wanted to find here. The girl suggested that they could talk to him, but young Shuhei replied that he was only saying that he could, that it happened automatically. The guests will get whatever they want. He is Shuhei Stro, and this is his dungeon. Lucas really wanted to ask one question, but the magician did not immediately decide to do this. Finally, he asked Shuhei how he died. The boy replied that in order to get into the dungeon, they must answer one question. If they make a mistake, they may never get out of here again. Lucas heard his friend's voice, his accent, as if they were back in the time when they chatted and laughed together. But Lucas's voice cannot reach his friend. He really survived alone. The magician clenched his trembling hand into a fist. No, he was not the only one left. Everyone he loved turned to dust over time. And those who did this still reign in this world. He, Lucas, will crush them all. Isabel watched her companion with interest. The boy offered to begin. He was ready to ask his question. Who or what about him, Shuhei, causes the most hatred? Lucas, without thinking, answered, "It's a demigod." The boy exclaimed, "This is the correct answer." Young Shuhei disappeared, and the doors opened slightly, letting in the guests. Isabel stared at Frey. She didn't understand how he could know the answer, and in general he behaves very strangely here. The girl called out to Frey and asked how he guessed. The magician looked questioningly at Isabel. She really wanted to ask. Maybe he wasn't Frey at all. But as soon as she opened her mouth, it seemed like madness to her. Lucas noticed his companion's agitation. He told the girl not to be so absent-minded. This is Shuhei's dungeon. It's his style to do something unusual. It is unknown what traps await them ahead. If Isabel wants to become stronger, she needs to put aside all distractions and focus on her eyes. The girl agreed and tried to calm down. Lucas said, "Let's go see. This is the threshold before the beginning and the end." Seeing stones were installed throughout the halls. Soon Lucas and Isabel approached the next door. The magician again placed his hand on the magic ball near the door. Just like the first time, a white glow erupted from the ball. Magical energy swirled in front of the guests. Now, a teenage Shuhei appeared in front of them. Lucas guessed it grew every time they walked through the door. The teenager suggested moving on to the second question. The magician was surprised. "One more question," Shuhei said. "The further they go, the more amazing things they can get. But they can only take one thing, otherwise his sweet golem friends will be angry. If the guests make a single mistake, they will immediately be eliminated from the game." This question concerns Iris Fistbon. Shuhei was irritated by this woman. He could never understand what she was thinking. Although they fight to save the world, her mind is always occupied by men. Isabel asked Iris Fizbin if she was a black witch. Lucas remembered Iris, a woman with jet black hair and an enigmatic smile. Is there a man in the world who cannot fall in love with her? Lucas has never met another woman as beautiful as her. Memories of her brought a dreamy smile to the magician's face. Shuhei continued, "Iris is Iris, but he hates Lucas even more. How could Troman not know that he meant the world to Iris?" The magician opened his mouth in surprise. Could this really be true? Isabel thought again that Frey looked a lot like Lucas. Shuhei added sarcastically that the golem behind him had figured it all out faster than Lucas. Now the question is, Iris served 3 powerful demons. One of them had 6 arms. Each hand holds a different weapon, a mixture of good and evil, Lucas replied. It's Asura. The answer was correct. The girl was surprised. Frey didn't even listen to the end of the question. Various magical decorations were displayed in this hall, but Lucas didn't pay attention to them and moved on. Here they found themselves near the next door. The third question was asked by the matured sage Shuhei. Isabel noticed he had grown older again. Lucas knew that the further they went, the more mature he became. Could this be Shuhei's personal diary? Truman wondered why Shuhei had created this place. What and for whom he wanted to convey. Lucas gave the correct answer again, and the doors swung open. Another door and again the correct answer to the question. The travelers crossed another threshold. Isabel never ceased to be amazed. She said that Frey was amazing. This was already the 5th room. It was all very strange. The further they went, the more questions there were that had nothing to do with magic. Lucas was confused about Shuhei's true intentions. The magician and his faithful companion walked further and further, and now before them was the last room. Troman's eyes were full of tears. Before him stood his aged friend, the sage Shuhei. The old man addressed Frey, calling him Lucas Troman. The magician opened his mouth in surprise. The old man continued, an archmage who rose to the top at the age of 40, a great teacher of humanity. Friendship with such a person was the greatest pride and enormous happiness. Lucas trembled and whispered. For him too. There were tears in the young man's eyes. Isabel couldn't believe her ears. The aged Shuhei asked the last question. He asked to be told his real name. The more questions there were, the more mysterious they sounded. But the thing was, Lucas was the only one who could answer all these questions. Troman answered slowly, Shuhei Weissman. The girl was surprised. Weissman, not Straw. The old man's face broke into a kind smile. He invited his friend to come in. Everything was ready for him. The magician shouted in desperation for Shuhei to stop. As he disappeared, the old friend told Lucas to come back quickly. Lucas begged his friend to wait. But it was all in vain. The vision disappeared. The magician's hand trembled. He realized that he would not see his friend again. Isabel was amazed that the great sage Shuhei had just called Frey Lucas. They entered the last simply furnished room. The girl noticed that, unlike other rooms, this one felt alive. Opening the chest, the magician exclaimed, "He found it." He had a small bottle in his hands, and Isabel asked what it was. Lucas held a rare oil called Ice River. 1 drop can cause a fantastic surge in mana. The magician smiled. Isabel is well informed about potions. The girl added sheepishly that she had always considered it just a fiction. Lucas smiled. He needed this bottle to grow to the 7-star level. Looking through the contents of the chest, Isabel asked if that was why it was here. The girl had earrings in her hands and asked what they were. Lucas's face fell. Isabel snorted at the earrings, looking at what a tasteless design. The magician wondered why Shuhei had left such an insignificant thing in the last room. Lucas said these are typhoon earrings, he made them. Isabel asked how something made by Frey could end up in the last room of Shuhei's dungeon. The magician smiled. He made the earrings because he was bored. Shuhei liked them and gave them to him. He never thought that they would be so precious to Shuhei that he would keep them here. Isabel looked at the strange young man in bewilderment. Finally, she asked him to tell her in detail what he had just said. Lucas looked at Isabel in silence for a moment. Finally, he decided to tell her everything as it was. The girl looked closely at the magician. He told her that he was actually Lucas Troman. 4,000 years ago, he fought against the demigod lord together with Shuhei. He spent 4,000 years in the darkness of the underworld in his trials. But one day the darkness receded, and Lucas heard someone's voice. It was Frey Blake's voice. Lucas didn't know why Frey had called him, or why their minds had become synchronized at that moment. But Frey called him, and Lucas answered. The all-powerful archmage and the weakest youth met in a surprising way. This is the body that Troman received from Frey. The girl looked at the archmage without looking away. So her guesses were correct, she said thoughtfully. So that's how things are. The magician was surprised. He thought the girl wouldn't believe him. She said that it was of course an absurd story, but a lot had happened, and oddly enough, it made sense. Yes, he really is the great archmage Lucas Troman. Kneeling down, Isabel handed him the earrings and greeted Mr. Lucas. He looked sadly at the earrings. Then he quietly took them from the girl's hands. He asked her to continue calling him Frey, so that it would be easier for him to achieve his goal. He also asked Isabel to behave as before. There was a candle burning on Shuhei's desk. The magician looked at his earrings. They evoked waves of memories. And Isabel took a bracelet out of the chest. She asked if Lucas had made it too. Truman replied it was made by Shuhei. This is the great sage's staff that Shuhei used for his alter ego. Lucas took the bracelet. saying that if Isabel put it on, she would not be able to handle the mana and would be severely exhausted. The magician put on his old friend's bracelet, and he stuck his old earrings into his ears. At that very moment, a stream of energy began to swirl around Lucas. Isabel marveled at the enormous increase in mana. The young man noticed that it was not his style to use magical artifacts, but this is the property of his old friend. The girl found a strange ball in the chest and asked what it was. It looked like a golem core. The girl noticed the concentrated mana. It seemed like something unusual. Taking the ball, Lucas told Isabel not to touch it. This was the last core. The magician approached the desk of his sage friend. There was a candle on the table that never went out thanks to mana. He was always a big fan of such nonsense. The girl felt Shuhei's warm heart welcoming them, as if he were alive nearby. Lucas opened the sage's diary. He felt uneasy, as if he were talking to a friend again. One of the entries said Lucas had disappeared. It is quite obvious that the Lord is involved in this. No one but him could have gotten rid of Lucas without leaving a trace. Shuhei was at a loss. Lucas could gather them all together, and with him, the last hope of humanity disappeared. In Shuhei's diary, Lucas read about the events after his disappearance. It described the conflict between Kasajin and the swordmaster Rushid, and also about Iris's sudden disappearance. Shuhei, left completely alone, could not trust even the people around him. People pretended to admire him, but they were ready to pounce on Shuhei and finish him off. The diary records every day of his fierce struggle. Lucas's friend, who had no one to rely on, continued the difficult struggle alone. Shuhei wrote that Lucas was an independent person. No one else could replace Troman. Shuhei tried, but the more effort he put in, the more he realized that his mana was leaving him with every passing second. Listening, Isabel choked on tears. The sage asked Lucas to forgive him. He was too weak for this role. Troman's hands were shaking. He whispered that Shuhei was a fool. He was so lonely. The girl quietly called Frey. The magician said that now that he himself was left alone, he understood Shuhei's feelings about being alone. In addition to the loneliness that Shuhei felt, Lucas would now also inherit his friend's will. Now let Shuhei slowly watch as he blows the demigod's head off. Clenching his fists, the magician moved towards the exit. Isabel looked at the diary of the great and unfortunate sage. She called out to Frey. The girl said that there was something else written in the diary. At the very end, Shuhei wrote in his hand, "Those who have read the diary, please complete Anastasia." Isabel finished reading. Anastasia is Shuhei's best masterpiece. She asked the magician what he thought Anastasia was. Lucas silently showed the ball. Indeed, it had Anastasia written on it. Lucas and Isabel returned to the stairs. The magician was sure that the stone was the core of the golem. Shuhei was an unrivaled puppeteer. If he is proud of his masterpiece, it is difficult to imagine what Anastasia is like. Isabel walked in silence for a while. The girl asked Frey if he could complete the golem with this core. Lucas was overcome with unpleasant memories. He then showed Shuhei his first golem, and his friend laughed at him, asking if this strange-looking thing was really a golem. Shuhei then laughed until he cried and asked Lucas not to make any more golems, told him that next time he should just ask him to do it. The sage laughed so hard that his side hurt. Enraged, Lucas hit his friend with a fireball. Memories of his youth once again made the magician tremble, but he still took the treasured ball out of the bag. When they are all finished, the history of the unwritten gaps will be revealed. Isabel asked if he was talking about the gaps in history, but Lucas said the story is about what happened while he was in the abyss. There were only a few steps left until the exit from the dungeon. Lucas began to tremble again, and he felt something was wrong. The girl asked what was wrong with him again. He told Isabel in a commanding tone that as soon as they left here, she would immediately return to the city. A flock of large drakes flew towards Lucas and Isabel. It looked like the pack was waiting for them to emerge from the dungeon. A trembling Isabel asked if this was really who she thought it was. The king of the drakes himself sat on one of the rocks. The magician asked the monster. Apparently he was waiting for him. The giant drake silently flashed its 4 eyes. Lucas repeated his question whether the king was waiting for him. The young man demanded that the monster answer. The magician knew that the king had intelligence. The giant laughed. What a funny little man. He really waited for it for a long time. The king asked the magician how he dared to enter the kingdom of Torkud without fear. Lucas knew that Torkt had noticed them in the forest, which is why he pretended and simply walked past. Isabel noticed that Frey's voice was shaking. She had never seen him so tense. The Drake King chuckled as he waited for the mage to emerge from the tree. The guy who went there had one good thing. The mage realized that the Drake was talking about the ice river. Lucas chuckled. So that's why Torkt became so ignorant. He was hunting people near this dungeon. The monster had wickedly used his friend's dungeon as a trap to fill its belly. Lucas's eyes flashed and he said that Torkt needed to be punished. Surprisingly, the Drake King did not laugh. He recognized that look. He had seen it before. It was Iris who ordered Torque to stay where he was when she spoke to him. If he dares to move after her, she will kill him. Torquard said he didn't like the way Lucas looked. The magician ordered Isabel to run, but the girl hesitated. Lucas said that he was not faithful to his victory. The girl stubbornly said that in that case, she would stay. Torquard said that the people looked very tasty. The Drake King wanted to eat them quickly. Lucas waved his hand, which was wearing a bracelet. At that very second, Shuhei's staff appeared in the magician's hand. The mage instantly attacked the giant drake. Torquard was hit in the face with a stone fist. The Drake King clearly didn't expect such a powerful attack. Troman shouted at Isabel in irritation, asking if she couldn't get the atmosphere. Calling his companion an insect, he demanded that she stay out of the way. Tears glistened in the girl's eyes. She pursed her lips and trembled with resentment. Pushing off the ground, Isabel shouted that she would be back soon. Torquard was surprised at how impudent the boy was. The Drake King belched a raging sea of flame at the mage. Lucas managed to dodge. The young man understood that this opponent was beyond his strength now. An enraged Torquard pursued the impudent little fellow. The huge drake belched out fire, trying to roast the mage. But Lucas managed to maneuver successfully. Despite Torquard's efforts, he was still intact. And then the magician realized that the king of the drakes was not so simple. A flock of large drakes surrounded Lucas from behind. Troman activated his old magical earrings. He then took advantage of Shuhei's staff. The magician's favorite ice spears began to whirl around him. To enhance the effect of the spears, the magician used another technique. A deadly storm wind blew towards the flock of drakes. The monsters bared their sharp teeth predatorily, but then the ice weapons rushed at them, bringing death. The pack of monsters scattered in all directions. Ice spears pursued and killed the drakes. Lucas flew away. He knew that he would have to fight off numerous drakes for a long time. Until the mage gets rid of Torquard, there will be no end to this. The Drake King continued to pursue Troman. The magician decided to try to blow up the monster he needed to calculate its speed and direction. Lucas threw a magic bomb 3 seconds before the explosion. Here is the charge right under Torquard, 1 second. The giant drake opened its mouth, preparing to attack the mage again. 0 seconds, it's about to explode. A powerful explosion occurred right under the monster's belly. A surprised Torquard was thrown back by the blast wave. Lucas looked at the monster carefully, and suddenly he heard the voice of Torquard. The king of the drakes was still alive. The giant said that this man was not bad. He correctly calculated the speed of the drake in such a short time and caused an explosion. The monster grinned. The approach was good, but the man had terribly little strength. Torquard flapped his huge wings and called Lucas an annoying insect. The magician cursed as expected. Torquard was too big. Right in front of Lucas was the evil Drake King Torqued, and behind there are a bunch of small drakes. What to do? This is such a dilemma. It seems there is no other way out. Maybe Lucas should drink the ice river he got from Shuhei now. Isabel asked him in the dungeon if he would not drink the precious oil. After all, the magician said that this was the purpose of his trip here. The young man asked Isabel if she understood what kind of drink it was. It will take him a week to stabilize the energy of the icy river, but they can't stay in the dungeon without water and food. No, if he takes the drink now, it will be suicide. The mage maneuvered between the drakes, killing the small monsters. Suddenly Lucas noticed that he had an assistant. The young man racked his brains to figure out who it could be. Torquard flew very close and opened his huge mouth. The magician cursed just a little more and he would die. Suddenly the Drake King received a powerful blow. Lucas looked questioningly at his unexpected ally. It turned out that a phoenix had flown to his aid. The divine bird grabbed the drakes with its strong claws. The frightened monsters could not escape the fire deity. Small monsters were no problem for the phoenix. One by one, the drakes died at the phoenix's paws and beak. The magician was very glad that the phoenix was okay after being healed. An old friend greeted Lucas. An angry Torquard asked what this was, and commandingly shouted at the phoenix not to interfere with him. The magician told the phoenix to fly away. The Drake King is not someone the divine bird can handle. The phoenix's eyes flashed angrily. Despite the magician's warning, he rushed at Torquard. The phoenix crashed into the drake's wing, stopping its flight. Torquard chuckled, saying it tickled him. The young man asked the phoenix to stop. Torquard is resistant to fire. The Drake King is the phoenix's sworn enemy, and the mage asked his friend to fly away. Lucas shouted for the phoenix to listen to him. The noble bird looked at the magician, and he understood everything. Phoenix knows everything, but still wants to help. He is trying to buy Lucas time. The magician realized that the phoenix wanted Lucas to escape. Is he really telling Lucas Troman to run away? The magician sighed. He was so helpless now that his teeth were chattering with fear. But why does this happen? Not because this body is not his, and not because magic brought him back to the world after 4,000 years. Lucas's determination alone wasn't enough. The magician asked the phoenix for forgiveness he needed to learn from the bird. The young man quickly decided to take refuge in a cave for a while. In the blink of an eye, the magician found himself in cover. He had to hurry. He thanked the phoenix for reminding him not to stop. Death for Lucas is just another chapter in his life. Swallowing the drink, the magician asked the bird to give him a little more time. The empty bottle fell from the young man's weakened hands. He fell to his knees and the transformation began. Lucas felt a surge of hellish pain, his whole body tensed. Manga was contorted, and in an instant his hair turned white, like Shuhei's. Troman screamed, blood pouring from his mouth and eyes. Streams of mana burst from the Archmage's eyes, and he screamed in pain. The entire cave was filled with the raging energy of the icy river. A crushing stream of mana rushed towards the exit of the cave. Lucas slammed his fist into the ground, trying to stabilize his mana. But the body still did not obey. The mana was raging. The phoenix let out a loud battle cry. Torkud grinned. He and the phoenix were familiar. They saw each other a few days ago. The Drake King decided that today was a very lucky day. The escaped man was good, but the phoenix's inexorable life force was far more valuable. Phoenix remembered their last fight. Torkud noticed that the phoenix had no strength left at all. The giant drake offered the bird to surrender and become his food. The wounded phoenix was breathing heavily. Gathering its last strength, the divine bird screamed. There was an explosion. Torkud didn't understand what the hell happened. The Drake King chuckled. It was no use. Fire didn't scare him. But the phoenix was no longer on Earth. Torkud was angry. The bird ran away, but he was sure that he was in no hurry. While the phoenix is in the mountains of testing, it will not escape from Torkud. Having made a portal, the wounded phoenix found himself in the forest. Having fallen among the trees, he caught his breath. The fire deity was almost without strength. He urgently needed help. And suddenly the phoenix saw a familiar cave. There was someone there. Lucas, stroking the bird, realized that he had fought a strong opponent. The phoenix closed its eyes and spoke anxiously to the magician. The young man reassured him, saying that he could help the phoenix. The firebird reminded Lucas of old times. He said that his old friend had the same look as this phoenix. At that moment, the phoenix realized that he was not mistaken. His old friend, Archmage Lucas, stood before him. Phoenix screamed. This might be his last fight. He rushed at his sworn enemy with lightning speed. Torkud was surprised. He did not expect such courage from the bird. The Drake King swore, clicking his teeth. How dare a pathetic insect attack him? Phoenix did not retreat. The cave Lucas was in was covered with a crust of ice. The mage cursed endlessly, trying to control the mana flows. He made a decision, but he didn't think it would be so hard. Lucas's hands were covered in ice. He mentally addressed Shuhei, saying that he had wasted the life he had acquired. This tragedy was created by the arrogance and complacency of the magician. Lucas didn't have the strength left to digest this elixir. Maybe it was physical exhaustion, or maybe it was a lack of determination. And suddenly he felt that the energy was returning. Suddenly it became warm. Opening his eyes, Lucas saw Isabel. She told the magician to lie still. The girl smiled. He had said that you needed to eat well to digest the ice river. The magician was surprised that she had already been to the city and returned. Isabel recalled that he had said earlier that he was alone. It was in Shuhei's dungeon that Lucas said he understood his old friend. Isabel didn't know what the Archmage was trying to achieve in this world, but she believed in him. That's why she doesn't want to hear any more words about him being alone. Lucas smiled bitterly. He can't even take care of himself. The ice crust had almost melted from his body, and he quietly thanked his companion. Finally, the magician learned what he was missing, what he was deprived of. It is not despair or lack of determination. It is trust in the people who surround him now. The fight between the Phoenix and Torque continued. The Drake King couldn't understand why the atmosphere had suddenly changed so much. The giant asked in bewilderment what this terrible cold was. Phoenix took advantage of the situation, his eyes flashing angrily. He quickly bit Torkud's eye with his beak. The Drake King roared in pain. How dare this little thing? The giant drake grabbed the fiery brave bird with its teeth. The Drake King angrily shook the Phoenix. He asked how he dared to encroach on the eyes of Torkud himself. The Drake King threw the wounded Phoenix to the ground. The wounded Torkud growled. The damned little thing should be dead already. But then the stunned Drake noticed that the Phoenix was mocking him. Torkud extended a clawed paw and yelled that he would kill the wayward deity. At this time, movement began in the icy cave. Someone very fast and powerful flew out from there. The Drake King opened his mouth in confusion, suddenly feeling very cold. Forgetting about the Phoenix, he tried to understand what was happening. A wave of terrible cold was approaching Torkta. The huge drake trembled. It was dangerous. Looking at the cave, Torkud muttered what the hell was going on there. Drake felt that this stone hole was filled with incredibly powerful mana. The king cursed. This magician is among them, the drakes. He is attacking. Turning around, Torkud saw that the entire flock of drakes had turned into chunks of ice. His army fell helplessly, frozen in the cold. Torkud himself was also covered in an icy crust, but he was able to break it. In 1,000 years, the Drake King had never felt like this. Torkud's instincts told him to run immediately. Is this really fear, and is it caused by man? The giant flapped his wings and ran away. The Drake King could not believe that he, Torkud, was afraid of a man. He was sure that he had to wait, because a person is a person. But until his eyes recover, it is worth staying away from that person. And suddenly Torkud saw Lucas right in front of him. But it is impossible. How could a man catch up with him? Huge ice spears were thrown at the Drake King. Torkud groaned from his wounds. Several ice spears pierced his mighty body. The giant drake shook. Throwing off the ice, Torkud exclaimed, "How could this be, since there was only a man in front of him?" Having flown closer, the monster became confused. Where did this little man disappear to? He was just here. Lucas said Torquard was so overconfident that he relaxed. 1,000-year-old fool relying only on his eyes. The Drake King cursed as the mage moved towards his blind spot. Lucas also created an ice spear. This time the weapon struck Torkud's wounded eye. The monster screamed deafeningly in pain, cursing the magician. The giant drake saw that the man had smashed the rock into pieces. He moved so fast that Torkud couldn't see him. A deafening explosion was heard from one of the rocks. The Drake King laughed bitterly. Torkud cursed. He felt the cold again. It turned out that his body had begun to become covered with a crust of ice again. The giant looked down. His favorite rock had turned into a pile of stones. Lucas walked calmly towards the huge monster, which was considered invincible. Torkud looked at the young man with apprehension. Finally, the Drake King asked if he was really human. Having landed on the destroyed rock, the monster looked at the magician with interest. Cursing, Drake asked Lucas what he was. A worried Isabel hid behind a nearby rock. The girl was worried that Frey could fall at any moment. It is very dangerous to remain in this state for a long time. The young man created an ice spear of incredible size. Looking calmly at Torkud, he prepared to attack. The monster was surprised by such monstrous energy apparently. The man really wanted to win. The Drake King refused to believe that his fiery breath would not kill a man even the phoenix could not withstand it. Torkud didn't know what changes had happened to this man, but the monster couldn't bear it. He screamed at Lucas that his end had come. The magician calmly waved his hand. An ice spear flew towards Torkud's stream of fire. Isabel shielded herself from the powerful wave of energy. What a terrible blow. The entire mountain range shook from its power. What an incredible sight. The clash of fire and ice is truly beautiful. Sparks of fire and pieces of ice flew over the mountains. Torkud did not let up the pressure for a second. And then it seemed to him that the ice spear trembled. The Drake King increased his pressure, putting all his strength into the attack. Isabel was horrified. Frey was giving up his position. What should she do if he lost? There's really nothing she can do to help him right now. Suddenly Isabel saw that the magician was not there. He left the shield in his place. But where did Frey himself go? Torkud was triumphant. The man was about to fall before him. The fiery breath will destroy a person. Isabel's mouth dropped open in surprise. No one expected this. Suddenly the Drake King stopped mid-sentence. His head separated from his body. Lucas was hovering right above the monster. Wielding a massive scythe, he instantly severed Torkud's head from his gigantic body. The dead Drake King went tumbling down. The remains of the monster fell to the ground. Isabel couldn't believe her eyes. Frey had been behind Torkuda the whole time. Has the 1,000-year-old Drake King finally fallen? If he fought half-heartedly, what was Lucas Troman's true strength? And then Isabel saw that the magician was falling. She immediately rushed to Frey. Catching the young man in mid-flight, she asked if he was okay. The girl felt that the young man's body had become completely stiff. Lucas whispered that they needed to find the phoenix. Isabel admired the fight, but the mage replied that he had only defeated Torked because he was inexperienced. The girl looked at the magician in surprise. Lucas explained that killing and combat experience were two different things, something Isabel should keep in mind. In battle, you need to develop strategy and tactics to defeat an equal opponent. He deliberately caused a mana explosion to make it look like he was putting all his power into the attack, but he was only using a fraction of his power. Moving to the rear of Torkuda, he created an ice scythe and struck with 20% of the force. Isabel said it was a good lesson. Flying to the site of the battle, Lucas and Isabel saw a terrible picture. The magician looked sadly at his lifeless old friend. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. The girl said that most likely the brave phoenix was already dead. The magician lifted the phoenix into the air. Isabel asked Frey what he was doing, and the young man replied that he was going to save the phoenix. The youth placed the fire deity next to the body of the Drake King and cut Torkuda's chest. The girl was amazed. The energy of the flame from Torkuda's heart was absorbed by the phoenix's body. A fiery, life-giving mana swirled above the bird. The magician said that the phoenix should rise again as soon as it absorbs all the power of the Drake King. Torquato ruled these mountains, and with his disappearance, the monsters will wage a slaughter for power. Lucas wanted the phoenix to become the new ruler here. If he controls the mountain range, he will be able to protect Shuhei's dungeon. Lucas whispered that he would look forward to their next meeting. Isabel and Frey came to the city of Kausymphony. It was very lively here, with townspeople of all classes and ages scurrying along the streets. Frey sat on a bench after the mountains. This setting seemed unusual to him. The young man has changed a lot in recent days. Isabel came up and said that she had booked seats on the ship. But, as expected, today it looks like there will be no ships at all. The girl asked worriedly how Frey was feeling. He needed to try to gain weight. The Shuhei armor from Torquata's nest is very useful. The fiery properties of the salamander robe keep out the cold of the icy river. Isabel asked if it was really necessary to take all the weapons from the nest. The bag had become very heavy. The magician replied that he could not allow his friend's things to rot in such a place. Sipping juice, the girl said that a new semester was coming soon. It was a very long vacation. It felt like a year had passed. Lucas noted that they had only been in Hispaniola for a week. Isabel asked if they should go to Pierre's mansion. June's estate is somewhere nearby, but today they still have to stay here. Approaching the mansion, the travelers were stunned by its luxury. The gatekeeper sternly asked what brought the youth here. The magician asked if Pierre was at home now. The guard asked who they were. Lucas replied that he was Pierre's friend. The guard clarified that he was interested in the name of the impudent young man. The magician laughed and said that his name was Frey Blake. Pierre warned that his friend Frey Blake might arrive before the end of the holidays. The young gentleman ordered that this guest be treated as politely as Pierre. Freya was ordered to be greeted with the greatest courtesy. It turns out that this boy is a friend of the young master. At this time, a carriage pulled up to the gates of the mansion. The guard exclaimed, "The lady is returning home." A luxurious gilded carriage stopped in front of the gate. Isabel and Frey looked at this miracle of luxury with interest. The door swung open and a dazzlingly beautiful girl appeared from there. With the help of the coachman, the girl got out of the carriage and asked what was the matter. Frey noticed that the young lady was remarkably similar to Pierre. The guards greeted Lady Lelia with admiration. The gatekeeper reported that his friend had come to see the young master. The girl looked questioningly at the young man, wondering if he was really her brother's friend. And then she realized who was in front of her. Apparently this is Mr. Frey. She heard a lot about him from her brother. And the girl apparently is Isabel. Frey's companion asked in confusion who was in front of them. The beauty smiled. She is Lelia, Pierre's sister. She invited the guests into the carriage. She would take them to the main building. Isabel whispered that this girl was so beautiful that it took her breath away. The guard tried to stop the lady, because they did not confirm the identities of the guests. Lelia looked reproachfully at the servant. The guard blushed deeply under the piercing gaze of blue eyes. The guard stood at attention and asked for forgiveness. The gates swung open and a carriage rolled out, bearing the name June. Lucas looked around curiously at how big this mansion was. Pierre's sister looked at the guest very closely. The magician asked the girl why she was looking at him like that. Lelia said that Frey was a little different from how his brother described him. His hair is white, but Pierre said it was gray. The young man replied casually that a lot had happened since then. The girl smiled and said that her brother's friend could speak to her informally. Lelia really wanted to get to know this unusual young man better. Isabel was horrified and kept nagging Frey. Pierre's sister asked, since she and her brother were studying at the same academy, how Frey treated him as a student. The magician replied that he was a first-year student and Pierre was a second-year student, and that they did not clash academically. Lelia thought that this young man was 2 years younger than her. Is Pierre really friends with such an ill-mannered guy? Finally, the carriage pulled up to the main building of the estate. Lelia and the guests walked towards the house through a luxurious park. Not far from home, the campaign was met by Pierre June himself. He laughed. Frey finally arrived. But why so late? We had to wait for him for a long time. Pierre asked his friend if he had finished his business. Frey nodded. Young Jun asked what happened to Frey's hair, and he laughed it off, saying he had changed his image. The magician admitted that he was tired and hungry, and Pierre guessed this. Lelia watched her brother with interest. She had never seen Pierre so excited. Young Mrs. June sighed sadly. She capriciously told her brother that she was here too, but he couldn't see her. Pierre laughed and exclaimed that it was impossible that he had not noticed their princess. The magician frowned. It was unpleasant for him to witness the squabble between brother and sister. Finally, Lelia turned and left, wishing everyone a good time. Pierre apologized for the scene. He still didn't understand what he had upset his sister about.